My name is Tyler Fornes, and I am one of the co-hosts of the Good, the Bad, and the Hungy AEW podcast here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. We take a broad scope approach to the world of All Elite Wrestling and the entire universe of Tony Khan. We talk about the big matches, the big stars, the promos, the storylines, and we also look at it from a big picture perspective. How are things going to change over the course of the next 10 years with AEW still in the picture? How are companies like WWE going to adapt and adjust to AEW? Are they going to be a similar way like they did with WCW in the late 1990s? Will there be a counterpunch? We talk about all of that and more on The Good, the Bad, and the Hungy every week on the Voice of Wrestling Network.
Want to keep your personal number private but still stay connected? With Line 2, you can get a second phone line right on your device with a super simple app and no need for another phone. Whether it's for online shopping, dating, or shielding your main number from spam, Line 2 is an easy way to manage it all. Ready for peace of mind without breaking the bank? Call, text, block, and more for only $9.99. Get started with line2.com/audio or download Line 2 in any app store today. Line 2, your second line simplified.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So fast to freedom. Stars tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for May 3rd, 2025. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed or on our dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed on all podcast platforms and applications. You can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click that red button that says sponsor this podcast, and you can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears. And yep, I'm out here ahead of this episode that we're about to play. Actually just got off the interview and call with Jay. We have 3 fun hours of Dragon Gate content ahead of you for this weekend. We do a bunch of Dead or Alive previewing up top. Of course, Dead or Alive coming to us one last time from the Aichi Prefectorial Gym, aka Dolphins Arena in Nagoya this Monday. We talk about a lot of stuff with Jay in this episode. A bunch about Dragon Gate, some about the overall Japanese wrestling community, Dragon Gate in the US, and just a real good time with Jay as always. Want to thank him for stopping by. We'll have him back on right before Kobe World. And without any further ado, here is our conversation with Jay Church. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll be back with you talking about this Dead or Alive show next week. Take care, everyone. Joining us at this time, the main broadcaster for Dragon Gate English content, Jay Church. Jay, thank you so much for joining us in what's kind of become our tradition of Dead or Alive previews. It's upon us one last time, at least for Aichi. How are you doing, man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, last time in Nagoya. I don't know. I mean, I think you guys did like your full preview show already. So if you just want to hit kind of like I don't want you guys to have to repeat yourself or do double content here. So just kind of like whatever. If you want to just talk about the main card, or if you want to talk about whatever you want to talk about, just kind of point and shoot.
Well, awesome. I think we're going to use Dead or Alive as kind of our big binder or branching point here, and see where we kind of go from there and get your kind of thoughts on everything. But as you mentioned, one last time in Nagoya, the Aichi Prefectural Gymnasium, aka Dolphins Arena, May 5th. Really, really strong card, at least. I think that Case has a full written preview talking about the card. How do you feel about the promotion going into this kind of big tentpole show and a farewell to this building?
It was very strong. Stronger than it. Anyway, it's strongest big show in a while, at least in terms of how can I say this? Like the intrigue and the where the company will be, the day after. Like it feels like the holding pattern is finished. A lot of these like bigger shows, like, well, maybe maybe there'll be a turn, maybe there'll be a title change, or maybe there'll be this, maybe there'll be that. But ultimately, there isn't going to be a big seismic shift. But it does feel like it feels like that has to happen this time around. So it's exciting. I mean, there's a new Jason challenging for the Dream Gate is new and fresh, and the Brave Gate's back, and people are happy that the Brave Gate is back. So, and the Tag League, and the last few months, everything since Yokohama has been really good, really good. So feels like the company has a bit of momentum.
I was looking at the ticket page, and I know it's impossible to tell because there will be some element of a walk-up crowd as well, but it seems like, whether it's just because this is going to be the last Dead or Alive in this building, or maybe the Yamato reign is catching on, people are intrigued by the cage match, whatever it may be, it seems like this is going to end up being a pretty hot ticket for 2025 Dragon Gate standards.
I don't know, you have to hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea.
And it really does, like, I appreciate how everything has kind of rounded into form. The way that you said, Jay, that it only struck me when it became very clear to me that, wait, Dead or Alive, it is Golden Week. 5/5 is coming up, Mike. You need to gear your brain towards that. That in a lot of ways, it's not just that it feels like that the limiter has been taken off, or that we are now advancing the story. And it feels like that this six-way steel cage survival match, in a lot of ways, kind of ends this current era of Dragon Gate, especially the way that you're saying, because at least the way I look at this, and very clearly when you like kind of take a couple steps back and you try to take the mile wide view of the promotion, and especially over the last few years, how much of the overall story of Dragon Gate is told through D-Courage and Shun Skywalker after the last 3.5 years. It really feels like that when we leave Nagoya, and maybe more so a couple days later in Tokyo Korakuen Hall, we might be in the overall general alignment of the promotion. Like we sometimes talk about unit shuffle season and the prospects of that, but it feels like, to me at least, that something like much greater than a unit shuffle is pending to happen. Just how everything has kind of come together with this Z-Brats and D-Courage program, and how things are set up for Tokyo right afterward.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Something has to happen, right? Like, we can't just leave with Ishin losing his hair here. So, I don't know. I mean, what are your picks?
So we were going through this pretty extensively on the preview we did earlier this week, and my argument against Ishin, because prior to sitting down and writing out a preview and then doing notes and getting ready for that audio, was like, all right, well, everybody's talking about how long Ishin's hair has gotten, and he is a heel, and it would be satisfying to some degree to see Ishin get his head shaved. But the more I started to dig into it, and I went, there's a written preview on voicesofwrestling.com where I go show by show, breaking down the build of this cage match from Yoshioka's return in February, his in-ring return in March, all the way through now, because I as we got closer and closer to this cage match, I go, man, this really is a good feud. Somebody really needs to sit down and break this down. And then I realized, oh, wait, that person's me. But Ishin has been such a tertiary character in the build to this cage. I mean, yes, he tried to get Valletta involved in the match, and GM Ryo Saito turned around and said, actually, I'm going to put you in there. But this isn't an Ishin feud. This is Shun and Minoura and then the three main guys and D-Courage that are there, and Ishin just happens to be there. So I think it would be slightly disappointing if, like you said, if we just left with Ishin getting his head shaved and we all moved on. I think the most interesting candidate to get their head shaved would be Daya, because I think him losing his mask and then his hair is super intriguing for what that could lead to. I think the best option would be Yoshioka, likely by way of heel turn from Madoka Kakuta. But I do think, for whatever reason, since Yoshioka's returned, he was gone for so long, I don't know if tension's the right word. I don't know if there's been a cloud hanging over his head, but I feel like collectively we've all been kind of poking Yoshioka with a stick, going like, all right, do something cool, you're back, do something cool. And I think him losing this match, I think, would release whatever tension that is, and I think then you could build him back up into the main eventer that he once was.
Yeah, you could do that.
It's also like an interesting cage situation where I think the person who I mean, Case and I were just in Vegas. I was looking around at the sports books, and I was a little disappointed about who will lose the cage match not being a listed a listed bet, but the person who would have the biggest long shot odds of losing their hair or mask would be Shun Skywalker. But at the same time, it feels like, especially the state of a heel unit, Zebrat's now being one of the older heel units in recent memory, I feel like that one way or another, although Shun Skywalker losing his mask is a potential outcome, it feels so minuscule. But I look at the cage match and I look at the landscape and I'm like, how does Shun get turned on and not lose his mask in this match? And just like the way that we are going to have to, that in my mind at least, I'm trying to plot out the match and how I think the landscape will be afterwards. There's a lot of things that can happen in this cage match that don't necessarily play into who is the one person left standing afterwards, because it does feel like a situation, at least even with someone like Shun Skywalker, who feels like the most protected one there, that everything is kind of about to change. And even though I think he's going to come out of the cage with his mask intact, I don't think he's going to come out of the cage still leading Zebrats. And I think like that's an aspect of this match that is really compelling to look at, when it does feel like, at least the Apuesta side, there's a couple of good candidates, and then from there you kind of go like, are you going to beat Minoura twice in a year for an Apuestas here? I don't think so with that, but they're still like, all six of them have really intriguing possibilities about where they enter or how they are entering this match and where they are afterwards. And that's, I think, something where I don't know necessarily I would have said that about last year's cage match, at least.
And Jay, real quick, just to add on to that, one of the things that Mike and I have been discussing somewhat recently is there seems to be an energy to Shun right now that reminds us a little bit of Yamadoi at the end, where you have these guys who are positioned as heels, but there's a level of popularity there that is starting to be undeniable. And it's not the same energy that Ishin has. Ishin is a heel and can stay heel for a long time. Minoura, God bless you. I don't know what you're doing with him. But Shun, it does feel like, even though the heel character is as strong as it's ever been, it feels like we're opening the window for a potential turn for the first real time in almost 3.5 years.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it's coming. I mean, and it's interesting that you say you can't. It's hard to imagine or envision a situation where he gets turned on in this match, but doesn't lose his mask. So it's interesting that you bring up Yamato and Doi. Remember, when Yamato had his big baby face turn, he got turned on in the cage, but still, who was it that lost that match? It was Kotoka ended up losing that match.
Yeah.
So it can happen. I mean,
It can happen. It feels like that's kind of where we're at, and I wrestle back and forth with that because, you think we've been doing these podcasts right around this time for the last 5 years because the first time I think the three of us did a show was right after COVID, and we were talking about how this would normally be Dead or Alive season, and you've seemed to join us ever since. And I think even in that time frame, like the amount of chaos that has ensued in Dragon Gate and the various topics we've had to talk about of who's booking and who's leaving and what's this and why are they doing that, there has been a level of a constant with Shun Skywalker as the leader of Z-Brats for most of that time now, that whatever is going on in the undercard, whether it's intriguing or it's boring, whoever's leaving, whoever's coming in, at the very least we have Shun at the helm of Z-Brats, and there's a comfort level to that I'm afraid to give up. I still feel like he has stories left on the table to tell in this current scenario, in this current era, however you want to phrase that. But I also, all signs point to, I could see them very easily doing a double turn here with Kakuta going heel and Shun going face.
Yeah, it feels like that's when all of this started. It kind of feels like that's where it was going to lead. There's been some misdirection with Ryoya here, and there's been, now Ishin is thrown into this, and that Minoura stepping to Shun could mean, ultimately, you're questioning Shun's authority, and that may backfire on him. There's a lot of different ways to go. But I think ultimately, Kikuta joining them and Shun, if he isn't outright turned on here, that being kind of the story of the summer is got to be where we're going.
And with Z-Brats also this year we've seen, or really since last fall, like Z-Brats is one of the bigger heel units that we've had really since like the beginning of RED, when you're still having a couple of people kind of float through. But it does seem like that you have a situation where you gain another member that has you walking around normally at 8 members. Like you really could go, and I know that at least with some parties, just because of other promotions doing these kinds of angles, might roll their eyes a little bit, but it does kind of seem like, okay, D'Courage does seem ripe for just complete destruction on Monday. But the overall thing of how the heel unit shakes out, we could very easily be seeing Z-Brats versus Z-Brats going all the way through Kobe at this point, if they want to go that way. It just seems like maybe if it's not everything shaking out immediately, there's a lane here that at least for the remainder of the summer into the fall that you could probably have kind of, all right, what clean side versus dirty side, if you want to think about it in if you want to think about it in real Hazard standards or Muscle Outlaw standards. But it does kind of feel like that might be a scenario at play, Jay.
Yeah, I think so. The other thing could be, it'd be hitting really close to how things played out with Monte. But you could do a thing where, Shun gets turned on, and then you've got a few months to kind of figure out, because everybody hates him. Who's gonna, he's got to go find friends, and the first, Homare could end up breaking away and sticking with him, and they can go on their own for a while. And if D'Courage tries to deal with Kikuta, get overwhelmed, and it ends up, I don't know where it's going to end up at the end. The other thing to remember is after World, there's Dangerous Gate a month later, and then there's nothing else. There's no other major shows the rest of this year. So there's a lot of time after World to carefully move the pieces around, I guess.
Yeah, that's what intrigues me about the finish to this is I think we're gonna figure out really quick what the world plan is, because and this isn't to maneuver into Yamato just yet, although I want to spend a lot of time talking about Yamato and how great he's been lately. But you open up this year with a non-title Shun versus Yamato singles match, and Shun wins that. And I've stored that away for the following few months, where it's like, okay, if they turn Shun dead or alive, you're right. He's going to have to do this thing where he sort of scrapes together a unit, and he's going to have to find friends. And I would imagine that Hamari comes with him, and we'll see where that leads to, mid-July. But if Shun turns here, I would imagine they go back to Yamato versus Shun at World. If they don't do that, now we're 2 months out from World. And even though I've really liked the booking this year, and I think a lot of guys feel very strong, there's no one else on the roster that I can immediately point to and go, that is a Kobe World Dreamgate challenger. Now, maybe if Kikuta turns and, catches a little bit of fire there, you could run Yamato versus Kikuta back, because the dynamics are way different than they were last August. But we're at a point where in the second half of the year, you're going to have a ton of time to let things play out. But we are also 2 months away from World without seemingly an obvious Dreamgate challenger now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if whoever turns heel out of this cage match is probably the best candidate to challenge at World and then lose, if he's going to lose there. I think the story with Shun, and he beat Yamato in January, and he was very vocal about, I don't care about the Dream Gate. It's beneath me. Dragon Gate is beneath me. I'm bored, etc. And I think that's kind of this. I think that's the story you tell with him after this cage match. If he gets turned on and he's out of Z-Brats, I think the story you tell for the rest of the year, heading into maybe into Fukuoka in February next year, is him regaining that feeling that the Dream Gate is important, Dragon Gate is important. I like it here. I love it here. And, making him interested again. And I don't know if I don't know if there's enough time between Nagoya and Kobe to tell that story appropriately. Because I think if he challenges, he has to win.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it would be too fast.
I agree with that, with the caveat being Shun is the one guy that I think, and maybe I'm off base, but to the Gen Pop Dragon Gate fan, you say Yamato versus Shun at Kobe World, people go, yep, that's a Kobe World main event. I'm not sure who else right now you could do that with. Now, again, that's, us anticipating a turn at Dead or Alive or shortly thereafter, and we'll see what happens there. But, you did Ben last year. You've done KZ. I don't envision a scenario, and I would pray to the gods that it's not Yamato versus Minoura this year. So that is the only thing. It feels too quick to fully tell that Shun story, but I'm also not sure if they have time to tell another story in that span of 2 months.
Yeah, I think it needs to be, again, if we're going down this route, I think World needs to be Shun and Homare winning the Twin Gate for Minoura and Lee.
That would be good.
Yeah, I think that's the path to go there. Again, who it ends up being challenging Yamato, assuming Yamato beats Jason Lee on Monday. I mean, you could do, Kikuta Yoshioka. You could do Dragon Kid. I don't know. You could do Hiromu Takahashi.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's not exciting. You could do Bushi, right? I mean, he needs a job.
He's got a free time right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it also kind of, it feels like, Mochizuki's got this match with Gianni, and it feels like it's going to be more than him just sending Gianni back to Malta, but that doesn't feel like a world match to me. I think that's more for, if that does end up leading to like a title shot for Mochizuki, that would end up being the
June.
one of the two Korakuen dates, because
Mhm.
2 days in you need to 2 days in Korakuen is too hard otherwise. So
I'm all for that. Yamato and Mochi and Korakuen sounds like something they should be moving in that direction towards.
yeah, I don't know. It's fine. It's not like super exciting to me, but it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
We'll
And,
see. You know.
and if that's and because especially coming out of Osaka and how that storyline is playing out, Mochizuki versus the veterans, it does kind of make a lot of sense, because then you're able to have one night in June be Yamato versus Mochizuki, and then you'd, instead of having this, I guess that would be almost 10-week bill. I think we're 10 weeks out from Kobe World. You're looking at 5 weeks, and that does kind of seem like, at least recent years, doing that sort of a 5-week kind of program. As soon as you move Dead or not Dead or Alive, as soon as you moved King of Gate out of May, it did not seem like you needed to have that main event announced that far out. So announcing it after a June defense makes a lot of sense to me, at least towards Kobe World.
Yeah. I agree. And I mean, that's what happened last year, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Right.
World's a week earlier this year, but it doesn't matter.
I think, like, also, like, staying within the cage for like one last moment, it's kind of interesting to me that the one person that's not really getting talked about a lot, at least on the babyface side in this match, is Dragon Dia. And I feel like that Dead or Alive last year, or especially like the month of May to right now, being like this huge like 12-month swing where he completely redefines what his potential ceiling might be. And it's just, to me at least, so fascinating that you have him now on the precipice of his second best of the Super Juniors, main eventing another major show for him. And if you would have told me this time last year, when he was about to pinch hit for Taguchi, I would have been like, oh, that's a damnedest thing to happen to that guy. I don't think we could have predicted how well these last 12 months have gone for Dia.
Yeah, certainly sees the moment, and it's interesting that he's going to be. Let's see, what is he going to miss?
Is he missing Okinawa or Hokkaido?
He would miss Okinawa. He would miss, and then the second. Well, I don't know. I don't know where his matches are now that, or do they just have matches? Everybody has matches every day. Is that how it works?
No, they've got it switched off. When's the Hokkaido tour this year? What are the dates on that?
It's usually right around the last week of Memorial Day. Yeah.
23, 24, 25, and yeah, Dia's got matches on 24, 25.
Yeah.
And then Osaka, but he's not in Osaka on 22, so he could theoretically do Yokohama the first day of Sapporo and then fly out. He did that last year. What about
That's some travel.
Okinawa?
Yeah, that's a crazy schedule.
Yeah, it's not that. You get on a plane, it's not that bad.
That's fair.
If New Japan will pay for the plane, right? Yeah, he'll miss Okinawa, but it doesn't matter. Okinawa's like, who gives a shit about Okinawa? And then it finishes on June 1st. Yeah, I mean, he'll only miss two shows where something could happen. 2 or 3 matches in Hokkaido are really the only thing he's gonna miss from the Super Junior, so it's not that bad. And then Ryoya will be in the UK for that one weekend, and then be back. So yeah, it's interesting.
So Ryoya's only doing a short stint. I was under the impression that he was like, it was going to end up like juniors from last year.
No, it's like he's doing like 2 matches, one match, because they need him back to do Orion stuff.
That would track, yeah.
In the place, that place. So yeah, they couldn't. Ho was complaining about it because they couldn't. Because he could have booked him in a bunch of different he could have booked him in a bunch of different places. Like other places wanted to book him, but they were at the company said no. Make sure he's back in time for. Yeah, he's got to be back in time for the Okinawa shows because there's Dragon on the 18th, and he'll have to be Orion in that.
Okay, all right, that's good to know because I think we assumed maybe he was even going to be out till closer to World, but not the case.
It's just a there and back, yeah.
Okay, all right, good to know. The Dia thing is so crazy just because, I mean, I remember talking with the two of you years ago about how high I was on him and how it seemed like the company was behind him. And, D-Courage as a concept, I think was so strong that first year of existence. And then I felt like he had peaked and we had seen his ceiling and it was, him being a very good wrestler and not necessarily a great wrestler. And I guess there was a level of disappointment there and a level of just like, oh, I guess that's all we're gonna get out of him. But him losing a bunch of matches in Super Juniors last year is the best thing that ever happened to him. And, it led to the Yamato match at Final Gate, which, I loved and a lot of people seem to really, really enjoy. And even when I look at him in this Super Juniors lineup this year, I would not expect him to be hoisting up that trophy like a Ricochet once did, but I think he's going to get wins this year. I think they've positioned him really quite nicely to where if they want to showcase him, they can.
Yeah, it's interesting because as far as I know, the people that didn't like him last year still don't like him, but there are people that do like him, and that's different. Those differences in philosophy are apparently going on in a lot of places in New Japan right now. So yeah, we'll see how he does.
I'm bullish on it this year. I did not care much about it last year, but I'm going to follow along this year. I'm actually pretty excited about it.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't looked at the blocks. So who is he in with?
He's got Hiromu.
He's got Fujita.
Yeah, he's got Fujita and Hyogo. He's got Hiromu in Yoyagi National Stadium. He's got a Korakuen match against. I just had it up and then it went away. He's got Korakuen with Master Wato, which is not great, but if they were going to give him a win in Korakuen, they could do it there. Or Clark Connors, which I actually think could be a pretty fun match.
Yeah, he could. Yeah. So I'm looking at the schedule now. Yeah, he might beat Hiromu. That was
my thought. Was in Yoyagi, they could do that there.
Yeah, that might be his big win. And who did he beat last? He beat Kushida. Was it Kushida that he got his one win over last year?
Yeah, last day one.
Yeah, he might be Kushida. What else here?
Yeah, he's got like Ninja Mac and Shizuoka. He could beat Ninja Mac. There's a few there that I could see him being much closer to 500 this year than the one win he had last year.
Yeah, I think maybe over 500, but third or fourth place is probably where he's going to land this time around.
It does feel like he'll get a little bit more respected. I do kind of chuckle at the New Japan English site saying his key match is against Yoshinobu Kanemaru on the 10th. I appreciate that one. They want him to get off the blocks with a quick win there.
Yeah, that's really gonna be his how his tournament goes, I guess, is if he beats Kanemaru or not.
Yeah, I mean he is a heel master that he needs to be able to take down first off. I feel like we kind of talked about everyone within the cage. I haven't been as much on Kakuta's Carnival tour, but it does seem like it's been going very well for him, and at least from the people that I know that regularly watch All Japan have thought that he's kind of come away as one of the better performers so far this year. So it's interesting, at least for me, for Kakuta. You have all of this character work, and that's kind of been the story of his year, and then he gets to go and kill it in All Japan, and maybe in a lot of ways work on the edge that he might be displaying afterwards as a heel.
Yeah, he was really excited to go and to go out there because it's rare opportunity, because everybody in his block is bigger than him, and that doesn't happen unless he's in there with Gianni. There's not many guys that are like considerably bigger than him, so he was really excited to go and just be able to hit people really hard. He's got 8 points, but that thinking in King of Gate terms, like 8 points seems like a lot, but he's still got like 3 matches left, so it's actually not a lot at all. So, but he beat Anzai, so then that was like the big thing for him. I think that was like his big win, and now who's he got left? He's got Rei Saito, Honda, and the Walmart Okada guy, the tall guy. Yeah, he might get one more win.
I think him and Honda could be. I don't love the All Japan roster the way that some people do, but him and Honda could be very good. And the vibe that I've got, I'm super behind on All Japan, but what I glean is Champion Carnival, not great. Kakuta's individual performance in Champion Carnival, very, very good.
Man, Takahashi. What's going on? Takahashi is 0-6. No, 0-7. He's got 0 points with 1 match left.
How the mighty have fallen.
Takahashi. What's happened? What's going on?
Too much YouTubing.
Yeah, he's got focused on the music career and trying to get his Switch 2 pre-order, and he's took his eye off the prize.
Hey, he had it a lot easier than us over here for that, at least. I do appreciate
he
now.
He didn't get his.
Oh.
Of course not.
Poor Takahashi. I do appreciate the fact that Kakuta is going to end up working 5 days in Hokkaido this month, and I'm just looking at this venue. I know this is where All Japan runs pretty commonly whenever they do Hokkaido swings, but boy, I don't know how I'd feel like if I'm going to the Appa Hotel and Resort and traveling all the way up to Hokkaido to see Ren Ayabe versus Madoka Kakuta. Like that's tough. That's real tough.
Is it?
It's the ballroom that they run. I feel like.
Yeah. They've got, that's one of Baba's old associates.
Right. Yeah.
The All Japan's like the promoter guy has been really good at kind of like rebuilding those connections. So they always do really well when they go here because it's sold shows in this place, and it's they do really well. APA Hotel and Resort.
It's a nice looking venue too. It looks pretty major league when they run there, given what else is available in Hokkaido right now.
Yeah. This APA Hotel. This is a many star hotel. Is this the APA Hotel? It's a 4-star hotel, 3.5-star hotel. How much is it per night? Yeah, it's 20,000 per night. Yeah, well, it's Golden Week, so let's see. When is this show? If I wanted to go to Sapporo
next weekend, 10th and 11th.
10th and 11th. All right, what's it going to cost me to stay overnight? My God, it's $41K. It's almost $400.
Ooh,
jeez, that's
why is it almost $400? Why is it almost $400?
People love Ren Ayabe.
Everybody, I'm in. Oh wait, is that where is Takashi got a match there?
All I've seen are the block matches for those two shows.
Oh no, Takashi's last match is in Korakuen on Tuesday. So he's the beast from the Northeast. They need to. Anyway.
I guess speaking of venues, real quick. Obviously, Last Dead or Alive and Dolphins, because Dolphins is going away. The
Yes.
conference center in Nagoya, the mid-size venue, is under 2 years worth of renovations.
Yes.
What do they do in Nagoya now?
I think they just run Tsuyohashi, and that's it. I mean, Stardom and Marigold have been running this place called Chunichi Arena. That looks like a nice venue, but I don't Chunichi Arena, Chunichi Stadium. There's or Chunichi Hall maybe, but I don't. I think they just put their head down and do more shows in the the place that they did the Tag League show from.
Yeah, the smallest of
a
the
gym.
options.
Yeah, it's a gym. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I think they just because ultimately, Nagoya Congress Center is it's 3 times a year, and we got there once. Once in January, so it'd be 2 more. It's essentially 5 shows that they're losing from that venue, and I think that they just had 5 shows in Tsuyohashi. If you, I mean, let me. I don't know if I've got. Let me see what the schedule through the rest of the year looks like and see if there's any dates on the calendar. I'm pretty sure it's just going to be Tsuyohashi. Let's see, because the next one would be August. August schedule is out, right? So August, yeah, they're in Tsushima where they would normally be in Congress Center. So yeah,
Okay.
I think that's the answer. It'll probably just be Tsushima because it is Nagoya. So and then December is, let's see, it's not even Okazaki, Saga. Yeah, I don't have December's not planned out that far, but yeah, I think it's just going to be Tsuyohashi for those extra 3 shows.
So you wouldn't anticipate a different, bigger Nagoya venue for a big show next year?
I don't think there is one.
I did see. I did see that the IG Arena,
it's 16,000 people. It's 16,000 seats.
Yeah, but I did see a note that their sumo configuration was going to be 7,800. So I didn't know with new venue if it's just going to be so outstanding to rent it at that point, but it does seem like they're going to have a smaller configuration, at least in this building.
Well, we'll see. Well, I don't think so. I don't think so though, because sumo. I don't know. Let's see. 7,800 is a big ask.
Oh no, it's a huge configuration. I mean, considering I think like their biggest crowd in Nagoya was usually about like 5,500. Like it's still enormous. It just seems like when I noticed that kind of it kind of jogged my memory because I was like, oh yeah, no, there is a Nagoya Basho, so they would need to have a place to do that. But I didn't know if they're even offering that configuration, given that could just be a sumo association thing.
Yeah, it's basketball and sumo are essentially going to be the 2, and apparently Sting is playing there.
Hell yeah.
Sting on tour will be at the IG Arena on September 17th. And who is this? Hans Zimmer is coming, and then the Nagoya Basho is. Huh. Yeah, no, but I think it's too big. I think it's just too big and probably too expensive. I mean, there's a new venue in Kobe that
right. That's where the B League plays at, right?
I mean, like there's a new venue in Kobe. Like I'm not even sure if it's open. Yet. What is this? Oh, okay, yeah. Gleon Arena. Okay, got its sponsor. So is this the right one? Or is it? Yeah, it's this place, the Gleon Arena, and capacity about 10,000. So if you set it up for pro wrestling, it's nice. It's nice. It's state of the art. And it's Kobe, so you would think they would want to do a show here. But I don't think it's too expensive. I mean, I think we would need somebody to foot the bill for this.
And that seems to be what the issue would be with most of these newer facilities that are now getting built up around Japan. Just even though that I know that like Prefectural Gym in Osaka is a public building and all of these, but when new buildings come about, the new rates just seem like, at least from what we've seen in the past with like when Tokyo Dome City Hall opened up and Russell One was the only place that ever ran it up until COVID. It does seem like that these kinds of situations are going to come up a lot.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if there's a pricing. Oh yeah, this is fucking expensive. Wow. Yeah, no. There would need to be there would need to be big sponsorships on this. But there's a gap in the schedule. You mentioned Osaka. Number one is closed for basically until 2027, and number two is going to be closed until 2027 from April of next year. So there's a gap for a second big show in Kansai, but I don't know. I don't think it makes sense yet financially.
While we're in this realm, we had a few people submit questions, and this was one of them, and it's something we've talked pretty extensively about on the show. I don't remember if we've had this conversation, Jay, so I apologize if I'm going to repeat content from maybe the last time you were on, but it really jumped out to me in Yokohama this year at Bayside, where hey, there were a seemingly healthy amount of fans in that building, hot crowd for the matches that really mattered, and yet the house lights were on, and the way they shot that show made the arena look barren. And there just does seem to be this hang up. I'm not much of a Stardom viewer, but I watched the Stardom show from this past week, and I was blown away at just how major league their production was. And I get it. Bushiroad backing, a completely different ballgame financially. But Dragon Gate has only taken steps backwards in recent years. Can you possibly explain again, if we've had this conversation, the insistence on having the house lights on for these big shows now?
Well, I mean, I think it's just Yokohama in terms of the big shows,
But even
Nagoya,
Kobe's changed the way the Sambo Hall's lit now too.
well, but Samba Hall's not a big show. See,
No.
and it's interesting because nobody else uses lighting in like Sambo Hall or Osaka number 2. And I'm not trying to defend this because Yokohama did and does look like shit without lighting. I talked to at the second one when they did Dangerous Gate there last year. I was talking with Machine J about it. I was like, what's going on with the lights? And he made the finger thing means money, right? And he was trying to talk one of his sponsors into paying for it, but it's expensive because you have to use their crew to run the lighting, and it's expensive, and it's an expense that they've decided not to pay there. And for the other shows, it's cost cutting, and ultimately it hasn't. I don't know if it was temporary cost cutting from losing lack of money, or if it was we need to cost cut, let's cut this. And now that they've come to find that it really hasn't hurt anything in terms of fans coming out, that the lights are gonna stay on, and it's shit. It looks like shit, but until I don't know, just send cash. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
That's fair. It's the type of thing that doesn't bother me until I see. And again, the corporate backing of a Noah or a Stardom is entirely different than the non-corporate backing of Dragon Gate. So I get that, but it doesn't bother me until I see what somebody else is doing, especially in a venue that Dragon Gate runs, and then I go, oh, this is not a good look.
Yeah, they need to have the house lights on in Yokohama next year. It's really all there is. But the other thing is you can't, if using the house lights is a difference between making money and losing money on the show, those other places lose money anyway, so why not spend more?
Yeah.
And
And I think Case and I both, like, professionally, like with our work experiences being around forms of production, I guess the one thing that I wonder, like you bring up the point that they would have to have their people working the lights. I have to imagine that, like, at a certain, like, just aspect of this, that when you're like talking about like those outside productions and bringing those in, because I know it was the same thing like with like Wrestle Kingdom for New Japan, like a lot of that is brought in specially, and it's a different company that does that. I wonder if sometimes there is that international fan versus kind of native fan kind of system, because I know, at least professionally in Case, especially in your area up in Chicago, there are certain rules about grips and gaffers. Grips and gaffers are the electrical workers on a production that like have to be certain union. Like if you're like running sound or running lights within the Chicago city limits, it has to be a unionized like stagehand, essentially.
Yeah, I mean that's why people stayed away from the United Center for as
Right.
long as they have, and I don't know what changed there. If there's just so much more money in American wrestling right now that people said we'll pay whatever. But I mean, there's a reason most of wrestling's history in Chicago was done at the Rosemont Horizon and Rosemont, and not at the United Center in Chicago.
Right. And I wonder if like within like especially like within like this field also, like you're not going to have Punch Tominaga be running lights for this kind of thing. Like if it is something that you do have a level of training and like this, there might be union considerations with that as well, as what was like the bigger point I was trying to make.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's union or what. I just know that to operate the lights, they needed to have X number of
Extra
Yokohama
people.
Budokan staff
Yeah.
on. Like they actually this time around, and nobody paid attention to it because it still sounded like shit because of who was operating it. But they used the house speakers for music this time around, and it wasn't just like the broken down JBL speaker set up by the entrance
Monitors. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they did spend a little bit more for better sound this time, but you need a person that is capable of. Well, anyway.
Yeah. So we touched a little bit on Yamato and what might be in his future this summer. We have not touched on who he has to get through first before
Jason Lee.
get into that. Yeah, Jason Lee. While everyone else while Yamato was in America, Jason Lee became Dream Geek Challenger, and we're getting a first time title match. Jason versus Yamato. Yamato going for, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, is this the 7th key this time? 7th defense?
Kakuta, Ishin, Kano,
No.
Daya, Strong Machine, KZ. This would be 7.
Yeah, for his 7th defense. And Jay, at least for me, as someone who has been a little bit more critical of Yamato as champion in the past, this title run has been a era defining in a lot of ways, resetting Yamato's career in a lot of ways when you consider that he is someone who is the most Dreamgate runs out of everyone, and in his 40s right now he's having the best Dreamgate run he's ever had in his career, and he's going up against someone in Jason Lee who, whenever Jason Lee has been given the opportunity, he's knocked it out of the park. Is this kind of, for me at least, this is my anticipation for match of the night. Jay, how are you feeling about Jason as a challenger and Yamato in this 6th Dreamgate run?
Yeah, no, I mean, after Jason won, I sent him a message on Instagram, fuck him up. Like, I'm behind Jason on this. Like, he beat Monte, he stole Yamato's catchphrase, got a huge pop, and he choked him out. I mean, choked Yamato out in Osaka, got a big reaction. I mean, like, this is hot. Like, Jason's earned this. Like, I don't think he's gonna win, but this is a great match. It's a great spot. I know some people are a little down that it's not the main event Dreamgate match, but it's not going to be if there's a cage match on the show.
Right. Yeah.
And
Dead or Alive,
that's
usually a lighter
that's
Dreamgate
what
match.
that's what these spots are for. If it can't headline, if it's a Dreamgate match that can't headline due to logistics, take a chance on somebody, and they're taking a chance on Jason, and I think this match is gonna make him if he performs as to what we know he can. And look, Yamato's the best. That's really it. I mean, his previous reigns weren't, they were what they were. The one in 2016, I know people are really down on. A lot of that was just circumstance. But I don't know. Do you think he's gonna take a run at the defense record?
I hope so. I wasn't sure leaving World. I was like, all right, I guess this is the right move. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And by the time we got through the Ishin defense, I've been on the plane of nobody should beat this guy. Like I haven't seen anybody come across him yet that feels like they're worthy of beating him. And I'm still so thoroughly entertained by this run. And for him to give Ishin what at the time was his career match, although maybe he one-upped him a month later with the Mochizuki Jr. King of Gate match. But the Ishin match, the Daya match, and the Strong Machine J match, and then yet another great KZ Dreamgate challenge, but it all is filtered through Yamato saying he's the best, looking like he's the best, and then wrestling like he's the best. And unless it's Shun at World, and we all have our reservations about that from a storytelling perspective, keep the belt on Yamato. I'm only surprised, and Jay, I reached out to you about this after Bayside. I just can't believe it's not hotter. I can't believe if Yamato is going to say headline a Korakuen show, even if it's a trios match and not a Dreamgate match. I can't believe they're not doing 1,500 in Korakuen just because of how good this Yamato reign has been.
Who does 1,500 in Korakuen these days? Well,
Noah.
Well, yeah, and that's the big story of the first half of the year is Ozawa, right?
Yeah. No, I don't like it, but they've got something there.
Yeah, I mean, personal opinions about Noah, personal opinions about Ozawa aside, what he did tell everybody is that one person getting hot can still make a difference. And there since the pandemic, it hasn't necessarily felt like that was the case, where a promotion could find one guy and they could get hot, and that guy could create a noticeable improvement in excitement and business. But he did it for them. What it means for them long term, we'll see. But I don't know. It might need to be the person that beats Yamato.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when Shima was doing the record-breaking reign, and I was doing my own podcast back then, and I remember it was around Final Gate that it was 2012, and it was the three-way with Shingo and Hulk, and everybody was like, we want this reign needs to end, blah blah blah. But it was like, no, he should hold this title until the person that's ready to beat him beats him, and then that person is going to be the one that like Yamato's just here to be. Because what is it in Korakuen now? 1,200.
That's yeah.
Yeah, his mission is to keep it at 1,200. Maybe bring it to 1,300, or whatever made up number it is. That it's about getting the other guy, because if it goes to 1,500 with him in the main event and then he loses the title and it drops back down to 1,200, then it means the reign means nothing. It's about getting these other guys ready, whoever it's going to be. If it's Shun, if it's Yoshioka, if it's Daiki, whoever it's going to be, that, or whatever combination of these guys that are the ones that makes 1,500 in Korakuen every month again. He just needs to be the one that keeps things where they are now until we're ready to make that next step. And that's what when Shima did the 15 defenses reign, that's what he was doing. Obviously business as a whole was much hotter when he was champion, but when he lost it, he was whole, because people don't remember. I mean, after things really like bottomed out, like 2009, it was still
Right.
a really tough crawlback in 2010. 2011, Blood Warriors versus Junction 3 was a hot feud, but it wasn't like a record-setting thing. And 2012 wasn't a record-setting thing, but there was, him as champion there was a lot of stabilization at that time, and pieces were moving underneath. And when he lost, that's when things really kicked off in the big hot run from 2013 to 2016. Really set off, and I think that's what the aim is here. So I wouldn't be too. It's never in Dragon Gate. It's never necessarily been the person holding the Dream Gate as the draw has never necessarily that's never really necessarily been the case. It's always been the supporting cast around the Dream Gate champion, and whoever holds the title at that time, it's just incidental. If they feel like a hot champion, it's because their unit's hot, or the feud is hot, or they've got hot opponents. So I wouldn't worry too much about the fact that they're not doing Noah numbers in Korakuen Hall with Yamato as champion. If he loses to somebody and it's still 1200 in Korakuen, then I would worry. Because then he lost it to the wrong person.
Yeah, I think having him break the record and then having a babyface Shun beat him is the move. It's just a matter of whether they can time all that out.
Yeah, he would need to do 8 defenses, and that's a lot. Unless you start, you could do June, July. So there's at least, if he, let's say the hypothetical Mochizuki match in Korakuen Hall. So that's let's say that's number 8, World number 9, Dangerous Gate number 10. I don't know, 5 defenses between August and February isn't, that's not, well, it would have to be 6 title wins.
With no real big shows after that, so you're doing likely, Korakuen level defenses. I would like to see Yamato versus Valletta, because I think Valletta would be more suited to succeed in that match than he was in the Monte match. You would hope maybe one of the really young guys on the roster, a junior type of guy, Kato. I'm still all for Kame getting a Dream Gate challenge in Korakuen at some point. You'll see where Tanaka's at. You've got to do a Yoshioka match at some point. You would imagine, again, if Kakuta turns, you could do a second Kakuta match. Yeah. I wouldn't be rushing to do a Kai match, but if you needed one, you could go back to Yamato versus Kai.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Just looking at the schedule. So let's say Mochizuki at Korakuen in June. Just for the sake of putting a body here, let's say Kikuta at World, and then we've got Dangerous Gate. Dangerous Gate could be like Minoura, because let's say we do the story of Shun and Homari win the Twin Gate, so now Minoura's schedule is open. He's not Twin Gate champion anymore, so you could do that at Dangerous Gate because it's a quick turnaround. You could beat him there, and then after that, it's there's no Gate of Destiny this year. It's gonna probably be I don't know for a fact yet, but it'll probably be 2 days over that weekend. So there's a defense there, but then when is Sendai? You could do one in Sendai. So let's say, I don't know, who do you do in Osaka? Let's say you do Yoshioka in Osaka. You could do Kai in Sendai because the show sells on the fact that it's Yamato's hometown show. So you do Kai there. What else? So that's, how many are we up to?
That's 5.
That's 5. And we would need another 4 after that. God.
So you do a Kato match at some point.
All right, Kato is a first-time challenger. You could do Flamita somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Flamita. I would fuck around. I'd do Flamita in Osaka if he's. I don't know if he's gonna be here, but Flamita would be an interesting one. And then you could lap around and do Benkei again somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
If they really wanted to, they could do Doi, but I don't think they want to. There's challengers. There's plenty of challengers there to get. He gets to 15 or he gets to 16, and then, or he could break the record at Fukuoka in February, and then whatever the Golden Week show could be where he loses. I don't know, or he could lose it to Jason Lee on Monday. I don't know.
He could. Also, Monte's a possible challenger. We didn't mention Monte, but he could. I'd like to see him and Yamato in a singles at some point.
Yeah, I mean Monte. You could do Monte. Yeah, so that's what Monte one. Just in terms of unique, let's see, one Doi. You could Dragon Kid somewhere too. I mean, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of potential ways to get there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with Tanaka. Tanaka could be at that level by the end of the year.
Yeah, Ryoya could get there. Homari could get there.
Homari could very easily get there.
Let's see, Machine J again. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see what the big schedule, what the schedule is going to look like next year too. Because Fukuoka moving to February, and then I mean, I would assume it's Fukuoka February. Golden Week gets one of the Kanto shows, either Yokohama or Otaku. I think it makes the most sense to move Otaku there because you keep doing the cage match and it's Dangerous Gate.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone who usually runs Ota over Golden Week as a big show, so I think that's the lane forward.
Yeah, because Big Japan does Yokohama,
right?
So you do the Otaku in Golden Week, you do World at World Time, and again, no Gate of Destiny again next year, but then you bring it. Then in 2027, it's back. Then that's back in November, and that's that. And that's it going forward.
Do you think that Fukuoka in February is going to be a permanent thing?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know, like if it's because of construction or what this year. Like Fukuoka, the Kokusai Center website doesn't. Well, let me look again because it doesn't have their schedule. Kokusai Center.
Because I wonder that because we've already seen that the Champion Gate weekend has been transformed into something different. Do you then but by that time 2 is under construction. Okay, I was wondering if you move that doubleheader over into the fall, but if Ideon 2 is under construction, you're already looking for a different venue for that, anyways.
What is this? Fukuoka Kokusai Center will be closed. What? Oh no. So the January 15th, 2027. Oh, it's going to be closed for a month. Sorry, this doesn't make sense. But there will be construction. There's going to be construction from May 2026 to September 2027, but the building is only going to be closed from January 15th, 2027 to February 15th, 2027. That's a little. Yeah, well, that makes sense. If there's going to be construction around the building, but it only needs to be closed for. Yeah, I mean, to me, looking at the schedule, it makes sense to me that if they're going to be moving it to February permanently, starting from next year, that it made more sense to punt this year.
Right. Yeah.
Because you don't want to do it December and then come back around. Like if it was necessary to lock in that date going forward, then I think punting this year is perfectly fine.
Some matches are temporary, but your privacy shouldn't be. With Line 2, you get a second phone line just for dating. No need to share your personal number until you're ready. You can chat, text, and even block numbers, all while keeping things fun and private. It's perfect for online dating, blind dates, or just keeping things light. When you're ready to move on, Line 2 lets you cut ties without any drama. Dating should be fun and carefree. Line 2 keeps it that way. Ready to date on your terms? Visit line2.com/audio or download Line 2 in the App Store today.
And all of these upgrades more or less are kind of about the same thing, right? Like these are all like the generational earthquake kind of
Every 10
updates.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember like about a decade ago, and part of that was after 2011, all of the construction that was happening that bounced everyone out of Corkin for a while and all of that as well. Like that's unlike the situation in Nagoya, these buildings, just so people are clear, these buildings are coming back. They're publicly owned buildings, at least. Yeah. Fukuoka is publicly owned, right?
The Kokusai Center is. I mean, everything, like none of this is, I know people look at the schedule and like, wow, that really sucks. Like Dragon Gate can't do these big matches. Like none of this is a case of like the market has been torched and you can't run a show anymore. It's not a case of having to downgrade your anniversary show to a 300 seat venue or anything like that.
Right.
Like some companies. It's, it just is what it is. Yokohama is kind of the blueprint on this. There was Yokohama Red Brick Arena all those years ago, and it was a great venue for wrestling. It wasn't a huge venue, but it was a great venue that you could do 800, 2,000 people in. And it closed. It closed to wrestling. The building didn't close, but they just decided they didn't want wrestling in there anymore, and wrestling was reduced to Radiant Hall unless you could run like one of the huge places. There was no wrestling in Yokohama except for Radiant Hall, but do good shows, don't half-ass it in the market, and eventually a building will either open or a building will open to wrestling. That's just kind of what you have to hope for. Like with they opened, Yokohama Arena opened, and Stardom did a great crowd there. Last week did a great show there, and Yokohama Budokan opened, and it's a great venue for wrestling. Looks like shit without lighting, but it's a great venue for wrestling. So you just have to hope that a venue like that opens up in Nagoya, or opens up in Sapporo, or opens up in one of these places that they're done, or something gets renovated in Nagoya. When Congress Center reopens, Congress Center is not a small place. You can do 2,000 people in Congress Center.
Yeah, they were doing like almost 1,000 a couple of years ago in that building. Like it expands out. Yeah.
I mean, it was 1,000 people and it looked empty as hell. Like, I mean, it's a big. You can fill that place up if you really, if you wanted to. So you do. If you can get back to doing 12 to 1,500 people 3 times a year in that market, it's not as good as having a big show every year, but it's still healthy enough that you want to keep the market cultivated. Like. So you just have to wait until April 2027 for the building to reopen, and do good shows in Tsuyohashi until then.
Jay, I don't think we've had you back on the pod since the emergence of Homare in September and the great turn there. And I said this to you, I think, in an email after the fact, but I think your call of Mochizuki versus Homare and the ensuing post-match angle, You've had a few over the years where I really put your commentary up there with anybody on the planet. You've molded into a marvelous play-by-play guy. I think Mochizuki versus Homare might be my favorite individual call that you've had. And then we had this real interesting period with Homare where he was this shortcut taking heel, a guy obviously brimming with potential, but there was a very short leash on him in terms of what he could do. And we all thought, leaving Rey de Parejas, it looked like until the final night, like, oh man, Sahara's really the one that stole that tournament. Insert Homare wrestling 3 times in one night in Kobe, crushing it there, and then had the match with Kame in Kobe earlier.
It was unreal.
It's fantastic. And then now here we are with Homare versus UT for the Bravegate belt. It's it's a match that UT, he's kind of had this ongoing story of winning the Bravegate belt at Dolphins at Dead or Alive, but now you've got Hamare here. What is your read on this match?
That's a great story. I mean,
Yes.
this is, I know. I don't know. What did you guys think of the Bravegate situation in general?
So for me, I really like the idea of the Bravegate going away for a couple of reasons. One, it was unquestionable who the top dog was. Yamato has proved that pretty clearly that he was the champion, and the Bravegate situation, him taking the belt and putting it on ice, that to me was a good idea. If it wasn't for the way that this tournament has turned out, and especially the rise of Hamare, and as someone who still has a real affinity for UT, wanting him to, have his dream, but I was a little bit disappointed when they announced the bracket of the tournament, because I really felt that the belt going away for, I guess, really now 5 months, I felt like that was a great time for the division to kind of reset. Seeing people like Hyo in the division in the tournament, kind of a little bit, I was like, yes, Hyo has been like one of the cornerstones of the divisions over the last few years, and his popularity goes without saying, but I found ourselves in this era of the Bravegate kind of being around Ishin, Hyo, and Daya, and I was ready for this break to kind of allow some time to breathe and allow like the next generation of Bravegate champions to kind of emerge. So I was a little bit bummed about that bracket, but the way it's played out, and especially Hamare in that Kobe Sambo Hall building, has been such a fun run. I just love and of course this is with Shun Skywalker, the idea that Shun Skywalker now has his perfect child soldier that he has cultivated, and then now he's unleashing upon the masses. It's one of I think one of the really cool things in Dragon Gate booking over the last 3 months has been this kind of a leash and emergence of Hamare. And I'm thinking it's going to end up with Hamare as Bravegate champion, if only because I've seen how much he's grown over the last 8 months, and I don't know if he could stay under 83 kilos much longer. But yep. I'm all aboard that now, looking back at it, how this tournament kind of has been like Hamare, like he beats Kame. He basically is able to counter Hyo into everything, and then and just kind of in a way dismantles him. It's really provided that refresh that I wanted, even though Hyo was still involved.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% about really hoping that this was going to be like a true reset of the division. Like I think I talked about this. I was on the show last year at some point about
yeah I think right before World we kind of had a State of Bravegate conversation.
Yeah, and kind of the need to how, let's say, like the weight limit was holding it back, for example. And I think this would have been a really good opportunity to do that. Focusing, keeping with the idea that the most important asset of a Bravegate challenger is their courage. And again, courage doesn't. What does a weight limit have to do with someone's bravery? So when it was just it's like Yosuke is in it and Fuda is in it, and like wasn't the most impressive tournament lineup. It ended up Yosuke versus UT was fine, and there was symbolism behind it, as the two last members of the Millennials and all that. Like there's that, but I would have liked to see something. I would have liked to see a bit more of a shakeup to this. What I said last time we talked about this still stands, in that the weight limit is kind of a relic of a time period where everyone that was coming up was gonna be around 80, 82. But since the generation that Shingo inspired, Kikuta was never 82. Kikuta's barely 82 in one cheek. Yoshiki Yoshiki's not 82. We saw Ishin now can never be a singles champion again unless he wins a Dream Gate. And I think this would have been a great
Isn't like
opportunity
Junior
to do that.
technically above 83 too now as well?
Junior's got baby fat, so he's. Let's see, what does Junior build at these days?
Because he was someone that I wanted in that tournament instead of Maria, for example. Like that was kind of what I was hoping for with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's guys like, I don't know. I mean, Ishin, Yoshiki. You mentioned, Homare is going to be. Homare was 75 on his debut, but he's put some weight on, so he's probably 80, 81 now. Junior's too big. Junior's gonna. Because his dad. What does his dad weigh? Mochizuki Senior is 85.
Yeah, I was gonna say I remember him being listed at like 85 to like 90 at most.
Yeah, and Ryoya's putting on muscle, so he's going to be.
He's looking very large lately. I mean, for Ryoya standards, it's noticeable every time I see him now that he looks bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and the other thing about the Brave Gate is it's the title for the young guys to fight over, and that creates an issue of, okay, when do you graduate from that status? Like, when are you officially an old guy challenging for the young guys title?
Yeah. Well, and that was part of what intrigued me about this Yamato stuff was when he won, I was happy with the way that they iced the Brave Gate belt for a little bit because I didn't want to see Yamato versus Dragon Kid in a Brave Gate match, because I think it would have had an odd tone to it. I don't mind that it's the young guy's belt, even if I think there's a way to make that feel a little bit more special than it normally has. But all in all, I echo Mike's thoughts on the tournament and wishing Junior would have been in there and wishing it just would have had a bit of a different feel. But I think we've come out of it with the best case scenario, with Homare feeling really hot, and with UT having this, this hometown match that feels like it could end up being incredibly special. And unfortunately for UT, I would continue the trend of beating him in his hometown.
I kind of had this theory that it was supposed to be that Fukuoka last year was supposed to be Dragon Dia versus Dragon Kid for the Brave Gate, and there was not going to be a Dream Gate title match there. And then when Dragon Kid got injured, they had to come up with something, because Dia backstage on opening night of KOG said, "I'm going to win this tournament, and the main event of Fukuoka is going to be a Brave Gate title match." And it feels like that the story was going to be, I win, and I'm going to nominate my teacher, and I'm going to show you that I can beat you. And then the come away from that would be the Brave Gate has become a championship that is capable of main eventing a major show, and then Dia vacates it, and it leads to some sort of sweeping change for the championship. And the fact that they waited until Dragon Kid came back to do anything with the Brave Gate kind of led me to believe that I was right on that. But then they didn't do any major change to the Brave Gate division. So maybe I was wrong on maybe I was wrong on that. I don't know. But the one thing I would put, like, I think I said after when Daiki laid out the challenge that this was ultimately going to end in a tournament in Nagoya, and that was good. I originally thought it was going to be like UT Dragon Kid as Nagoya versus Nagoya, but then my
someone finally has to win in the building.
But my follow up to that was, or just do a tournament and have Homare win the whole thing, and I'd feel bad for UT if he lost here. But at the same time, Homare losing here, if they're going to do if they're going to have Shun turn, it would feed into like him losing to UT would kind of feed into a reason for, let's say maybe Z-Brats to turn on Homare, that you couldn't even beat. You wrestled this broken down piece of shit that always loses in his hometown. He failed for 12 years, then he ran into you and you lost to him. Like, that makes kind of a good reason for Z-Brats to let him go. But at the same time, I kind of want him to win. I hate to say it, I want but poor UT. I want Homare just to super kick him and Firebird splash him and win the title.
I'm with you. I think it'd be a nice moment if UT won, but I think the long term. I mean, look, we were talking about it on the podcast this past week. If you don't put the Bravegate belt on Homare now, he's gonna be too heavy for that belt really soon. And then the only way he becomes a Grand Slam champion is if he does a Yamato type, win both belts at the same match type deal.
Yeah. I'm a little more. It's interesting about now. Where does the Bravegate go after this? Because the problem is, and I think the last time we talked about the Bravegate, it was right before World, so it was before Daya versus Hyo.
Mm-hmm.
And Daya versus Hyo was a big match for the Bravegate. It was high up on the card. You had a lot of hype. Two guys that are super popular, anchors of the division, etc. Because it was, it was sixth on the card. It was above the Triangle Gate, and but then they came back, and his first defense was the dude from Noah, which was a major step down. And then who did he defend against after that? And then it was
it was against Tanaka. Or Kame, then Tanaka.
Yeah, Kame and Sendai in a match that was like him burying Kame and telling him to put your big boy pants on, drop the entrance music, wash your ass, get out here, and he just beat him. And then it was Ryoya, and then he lost the championship. But so if you go back to Hyo's reign, Hyo beat Ishin. But then it was Kame, but then it was Horiguchi, and then it was Kage, and then it was Punch, and then it was Kanda. This is where they're not being a mid card from 2006 to 2016. Like, the Bravegate feels that more than the Dreamgate does, I think. Because this would be where instead of having to do Punch and having to do Kanda and having to do Horiguchi again, like, this is where it would be, I don't know, Kenshin, or this is where it would be Lindemann or Yamamura or Ishida. So the fact that there's this cavern in between the old guys from the Bravegate division and then the young guys of the Bravegate division. That's another place where lifting the weight restriction would help, because it would open up those, like, the filler challenges could be opened up a lot more. But alas, you're just going to have to make do with kind of looping around these, the other guys in the tournament. So let's say UT wins, you loop around, and his first defense is against, I don't know, his first defense is against Flamita, and then his second defense is against, Kame at World, because it's Natural Vibes versus Natural Vibes, and then Kame wins, and then he defends against Hyo, there's not a lot of variety, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at in this division. Like, eventually you're going to have to get to the usual suspects like Punch and Horiguchi, and like that is what really brings the division down, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could say that. I guess whether it's UT or it's Homare, and I would rather, if they were going to go in this scenario, I would rather it be UT, because I like the idea of doing Shun and Homare for the Twin Gate belts at World so much. But it feels like whoever wins this could very easily do a Dragon Kid match at World. And yes, that's an older Bravegate guy, but it's also, Dragon Kid is a better person to be in this position than like Genki at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ever going to see like a big Dragon Kid singles match again.
Well, I asked him in Vegas, I said, "How's your neck?" And he said, "Not good." I was like, I'm very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's not good. Like, he still has numbness. Like, his head is numb.
Ugh.
You know, like, he can bump, like, but you know, he can bump, and like, he knows how to, you know, he knows how to wrestle a match. He knows how, like, he can wrestle smart enough, and like, it does, like, wrestling doesn't make it worse. But you know, I don't know if we're gonna get another big Dragon Kid singles match ever. Like, I don't know if it's like a BB Hulk situation now, where you know, like, Hulk doesn't really do singles matches anymore, and that
Which is
his Dragon
fine
Kid,
because he's been super fun and Paradox. Like he's kind of figured out a way to use his body in the state that it's in to
yeah, he's been great.
yeah, you know, I didn't think he still had that in him, but he's been really fun since he joined Paradox.
Yeah, he has been. Like, I was thinking that like he was done
Yeah.
when he got kicked out of Gold Class. Like, I thought, okay, like, is he retiring in Sapporo? But no, he's been like, Hulk has been, you know, he's been revitalized. He's been good. You know, his anniversary match was fun. You know, I think he could go for a lot longer
Yeah,
in this, you know, in this state.
we
Yeah.
were in like a 4-year stretch where, you know, Mike and I would joke like, is this going to be the last BB Hulk title match ever, whether it was, you know, Dream or Twin or Triangle? But now it's like, all right, I can live with him in this spot because I think that Triangle Gate team has been a real revelation where you've got Kage and Hulk, I think, working above where we thought they could still go.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. Do you think they get through? Do you think they get past Vibes on Monday?
I think so. There's a part of me that I kind of lump Paradox all into the same bucket, and some of this is how good Yamato's been, but it's equally been how just Paradox as a unit, like playing the veteran role, being the wall that the younger generation must steamroll through before kind of taking their places, has been such a great run, and especially with Kage, like whenever he gets something to sink his teeth into, it's noticeable in his output. But even though I look and I see Natural Vibes coming back with Flamita, I mean, now they're back at 4 right now, possibly 5 with Hio after Tokyo. I just there's still the reality that Natural Vibes, this does really kind of feel like a time, and it does kind of play into the cage match, and that we feel like that we are coming to that climactic action with it. And as a part of that, there's a part of me that goes, okay, D-Courage not likely to make it out of May. Do we also lump in Natural Vibes with them at this point too? Because I don't know if you're able to do another generation next version chapter 5 of Natural Vibes right now. I feel like it's kind of time for this group to go away, and then maybe we revisit it down the line with like KZ in a much more veteran role. I just think Natural Vibes has kind of run out its string, and even with Flamita back, that only is like a short-term kind of jolt to them, and it's better to kind of figure out a good exit path for the guys involved.
It's the coldest I've been on Vibes since they reunited in 2021. So 2.0 and 3.0. If they went away tomorrow, I would say, okay, I'm good. I got my fill of Vibes. But that's also, I mean, they were a unit with not only 3 people, they were a unit with 2 people for most of the year. So I get why they're cold, but I've seen the company progress to a point where I'm not sure I need Vibes at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I'm done with them too. I guess we'll see what happens. I would probably run them. What do you do? I think Flamita's in until World, and then he leaves after that. So I'd keep them together until World, and then maybe and then maybe move towards dismantling them around Otaku. Maybe start doing some disband stuff and have Machine J. No, I don't know what you do.
It's strange that we're talking about Shun turning face, because I felt like for the last two incarnations of Vibes, 2 and 3, it's like, okay, Vibes has to end with Z-Brats disbanding them. It feels like there's a larger story with Shun taking these guys out, but Vibes has slipped down in terms of relevancy this year to a point that, again, if you just, if you want to do a June disbands match and end up with, Monte, Flamita, Bandito being unaffiliated going into World and doing like a Triangle Gate challenge, and then you leave KZ, Jay, and UT to kind of fend for themselves, I'd shrug at that and go, yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm pretty much the same on that. So I think we're all kind of in agreement that they're probably not getting Kyo.
No. It really kind of feels like, to me, with Hyo, him and Ben-K have such easy kind of chemistry, being classmates and never really getting to be in the same unit with each other. Whatever, like if it ends up being the peace and love party or what have you, that Hyo with Ben-K and then the young guys feels like the right move forward. Whereas with Natural Vibes, like the person I'm really interested about coming out of this is Jay, because he debuted essentially as a tweener and then became more progressively face, especially joining Natural Vibes. But we have like two things that we've not really seen of him yet that I'm kind of chomping at the bit for, and I'm interested to see what y'all think about this. We've not seen Jay be a full-blown heel, like the Strong Machine Army played more tweener, I felt like, but we've not seen him kind of do that kind of role. And I feel, however everything kind of shakes out, I wouldn't, if you're turning Kakuta, I don't know if you do Kakuta and Jay at the same time. I don't know how that really.
There's no space.
There's not a lot of space, but that's that's an open question with him. And secondarily, and what's more realistic is, I know that Jay, last year when we talked about his captaincy of Natural Vibes, I was a little less enthused about it than you two, and part of that was because I want to see what like a unit in his image ends up being, and I feel like that his leadership of Natural Vibes and KZ's leadership of Natural Vibes feels so muddled that that's the other open question about him, is what does a J-led unit with his methodology, what does that look like? So that's what I'm interested in coming out of Natural Vibes, really.
I don't think we get that from any unit anymore. Like, I don't think, aside from Shun, I don't think anybody has a strong enough. There isn't anybody that has a strong enough personality. And this isn't a knock on these guys, because this was the same for the last generation of guys, because
it was just Shingo having things in his image, no one else.
It was originally, because in the early days of Toryumon, it was the four leaders. It was Shima, Magnum, Milano, Mochizuki, and they were four guys. They were four. I can't even think of the superlative. They were four unbelievable forces of nature. So having unit leaders, it was natural to have unit leaders because there was nobody else that was strong enough to approach them. But after that, like Muscle, even starting from like the Muscle Outlaws period onward, when they were trying to say Gamma was the leader or Yamato was the leader of Muscle Outlaws, but nobody really felt it because it was just, they were a collection of people. And then when you got into like the 2000, like post Blood Warriors period, it was always like the top two. It was Doyoshi, Shingo and Yamato, Hulk and Akira. There was never like a single individual. Like BB Hulk's units, there was always a bit of Hulk's flavor to it because he would do the logo design and design the colors and all that. But the other units, you wouldn't look and say, aside from Shingo, like you said, Shingo and Berserk, you wouldn't. But even Berserk, when it started, there was Doi and Yamato as well. So there was never a unit that you would look at and say, okay, this unit is built in the image of this guy. Like, I think that's thinking in that way is a habit that we didn't get rid of. That's out, and that hasn't been the case in over, in a long time. I think what would be more likely to happen is Machine J would leave, and he would team up with Daya and Yoshioka, or he would team up, with Yoshioka and Ryoya, and they would make a unit, and they would come out to Machine J's solo entrance music, because God forbid anybody get new entrance music in this company. And I mean, that might be the other reason why none of these units are going to break up. But
well, do you feel like there's a dominant trend now where you had the original 4 in Torimon, and then you had the stretch, like you said, where it was the duos on top? Do you feel like there's a trend with the current units, or is it just a hodgepodge of guys that happen to be teaming together?
Right now, it's interesting, right? Vibes feels like a bunch of guys that are just teaming together.
And I would argue at this time last year, when Flamito was coming back into the picture and Shimizu was there, vibes felt like vibes. It felt really good. Even when Kame was there, it felt really good. It's 2025 has not been friendly to that unit.
Yeah, and Gold Class has managed to create a pretty strong rally and get back together. Like, I would imagine I think they keep the name when Hyo joins. I know that they were back in December and plans have changed a million times since then, so this is an indication of anything that's going to happen going forward. I know they were talking about bringing in both Monte and Hyo and rebuilding everything, like dropping the name, rebranding, and all that. But that's changed, obviously. That's obviously changed a million times, because that was supposed to happen at the end of last year. But I think now the Gold Class name there's still some brand value left in it, so I think they keep it and just go with the 5 of them as Gold Class. But everybody, D-Courage it's in the name. It's Daya and Yuki, and the other guys are just kind of there. And it's they've never been a 4-person unit. As soon as Ryoya joined, Yoshioka went out, and then Yoshioka came back, and now they're a mess. And Z-Brats, the only original members left are Shun and Kai, and if Shun leaves, then I would think that they rebrand as well. I mean, I don't know who. So if you replace Shun with Kikuta, so you've got Kikuta, Minoura. Rai's been a heel for 5 years now.
He needs to turn face, yeah.
5 years is a long, but you're started do you turn KZ? Like, if Vibes breaks up, do you put KZ there? Do you put KZ with Paradox? Does KZ make his own unit? Do you put KZ with Gold Class? That would be interesting.
God, that'd be some fun trios matches with any combination of the guys already in Gold Class and KZ.
Yeah, so you put Hyo and KZ to Gold Class, and then Kikuta goes to Zebra. God, but you have to make a unit with Shun, and I can't imagine anybody being friends with this guy. Like, you got Shun and Homare. Do the remnants of D-Courage team with him? I mean,
I could see Daya being in there.
Do you? I mean, all of the last 5 years have been Shun Skywalker's immediate fault to Daya. Like, that's that. I don't know if I would call it a full-on generational rivalry, but it seems kind of fresh for that.
But Shun has said, and this is interesting because this ends up becoming the worst person has made a great point, in that Shun has said all along about Daya and Yoshioka that they should stop playing the victim, because without Shun doing what he did, D-Courage never happens. All their success never happens. So you could do with, and it might be flimsy, it might but it might not. You could do something where Daya is like, look, I'll never forgive you for what you took from me that day, but you are right in that if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am today. So because of that, blah, 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 blah. I'll lend you my power this one time to fight Z-Brats, and it turns into them making a group, or whatever happens.
We just have to make sure they don't have a 2-minute entrance this time.
I'll say anecdotally, people, because we were talking about Hyo, people in America were really impressed with Hyo when he came over in Vegas. That was from wrestlers that I've talked to in the ensuing weeks, and the people that I was there with that are aware of Dragon Gate, will watch, say, a Dead or Alive, but aren't locked in. Hyo and Ishin were the two that people were, I think everybody expected Shun to be good at this point, but the point I made, because I felt it in the building, even on Wednesday in front of the bored and disinterested Game Changer crowd, was the spot that we take for granted, the Hyo corner spot where he ends up doing the handsprings all across the ring. There's nobody in America, especially on the indie level right now, there's nobody that can do that cleanly in the way that Hyo does it. And once he did that, he had people. And I was surprised, I guess, just because I've seen him, over the last few years, really take a step up in his game. People were not ready for the Hyo outings that he had in Vegas, and people were very impressed by him.
Good. It's good. It's good to hear. He was the one that we were the most worried about, but in the ring he can move.
Yeah. Well, even
he pops off the screen.
Yeah.
Especially in tag matches.
Hyo is the one person from the Dragon Gate shows that my wife, who is completely disinterested in wrestling other than she finds it interesting how much I'm into it. Hyo is the one that, like, afterwards she's been like, so what's Hyo up to? Like what's his deal? Is he teaming with Benkei or is he teaming with KZ? And I feel like that he had like a certain kind of like jump off the screen that even like translates to people who aren't super into wrestling, and it goes across cultural lines. And Ishin just, oh my gosh,
Ishin was unbelievable.
As soon as I really feel like as soon as Ishin realized that the crowd was willing to go along with him on his bits, I think that just kind of empowered him. And I'm sorry that's what we've had, that he took that back with him in Japan, and now he's playing manager.
Yeah, he should have. We wanted to book him in a death match.
We wanted him against Mad Dog Connolly in a dog collar match. There's a guy that's all he does, and he's great at it. That him versus Ishin in a dog collar match would have fucking owned.
I tried. There's a promoter that we're friendly with, and I tried pretty hard to get Ishin versus this guy Mad Dog Connolly booked. In the same way that Valletta has molded a Brody act into a way where it seems like it works in Dragon Gate, this Mad Dog Connolly guy has molded it into a different kind of Brody-esque character that really works on the U.S. Indies, and he's really exciting. And his thing is dog collar matches, and I really wanted him and Ishin to go at it, but it did not end up happening.
Yeah, we tried to talk him into doing a death match. We're like, hey, you want to do a death match? And he was like, no, scary. So, when it was still like, are they going to do a show, or are they just going to send guys? I'm like, you should just send Ishin to do a death match and send Rita to do Bloodsport, and that's it.
Yeah, Rita's, I'm sure, quite annoying to everybody that was over there, but Rita and Kame and Jason were the names that I kept bringing up of like, hey, if you guys come back, Rita, Kame, Jason, those are the people, the people that we want.
Who knows how expensive or how hard it is, how hard it's going to be to renew the visas this time around. I wouldn't take anything immigration related for granted.
No.
For the next 2 years, I guess. How long do we have until midterms?
Yeah, no, the next 18 months at least. No, that was one of the reasons why, as soon as it seemed like things were locked, I was like, well, I don't know when the next time, if ever, they will be back in the States because of everything. Like I know I was talking to Case and Rich about this a lot over the the week. I was like, I'm glad everyone got here. I'm just hoping everything goes smoothly and there's not going to be something happening. And fortunately, it seemed, other than hotel issues for Ho-Ho, it seemed like everyone was able to get everything taken care of.
I had to do the awkward, get everybody get everybody that was going on tour and talk to them at that last Cork and be like, okay, this is what's happening in immigration. Keep your documents on you at all times, and especially when there's no English speakers around you. You just have everything and be able to explain why you're there and where you're from, and etc. And please don't end up in El Salvador. and thankfully everybody made it back. Even Ho-Ho, who was left on his own on 420 and beyond in Las Vegas, has safely made it back. So that's good.
Jay, what have you heard from either Ho-Ho or the people that went over? I mean, again, I think everybody left, even though that Friday show, was head to head with Spring Break and
SmackDown too.
And SmackDown. And I personally don't feel like the PWR side of that joint relationship, I don't think they held their own in terms of marketing that show. So sparsely attended, but also a fantastic show. I mean, show of the weekend outside of maybe the Deadlock show. Have you heard anything from anybody, happy, sad, any stories that happened in Vegas that have been passed to you?
No, I mean, I haven't seen anybody.
That's true. Yeah,
we got back. I'm not going to see, like, I've talked to Ho-Ho, and Ho-Ho's, I think, he was running around and doing so many things that I don't think any of it settled. And Ho-Ho's just looking at his wallet. Ho-Ho's an American voter. He's looking at his wallet, and that's gonna decide his next step. There's no other thought put into it. But I don't know. Like, it's GCW has. Their schedule is locked in, right? Because they start on Thursday, and they've got whatever is the kickoff, and then they've got Tokyo Joshi, and they've got DDT, and they've got Spring Break, and they're not going to give those spots up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Dragon Gate is not going to, unless DDT decides they're not coming to the U.S. anymore. Then that spot opens up. But that's not gonna, as long as they've got Cyberfight money and they're able to get visas, they're gonna keep going.
And it helps if they have Takeshita available on those shows. That's a draw that Dragon Gate doesn't have.
Yeah, for now they have him.
Yes.
But even beyond that, it's just there's no incentive for GCW to open a bidding war for that day. One, because we're if it goes into a bidding war, we're not gonna get into a bidding war over the day. We're just gonna say no, right? So you have to take the Wednesday, because GCW doesn't give a shit, like they don't give a shit whether Dragon Gate comes or they don't. They just want to fill. We've got the building rented on Wednesday, and we've got an open space, and nobody else is going to take it, so we'll offer it. And that's essentially what that Wednesday, that's what that Wednesday slot was. And then the Friday, like, there wasn't going to be a Friday show, but the PWR guy. I mean, he's the guy that does all the visas and everything. So, he's
right.
like the important partner. Like the venue was a good deal on the venue on that date. So, it was just like, it wasn't any extra cost to run that show. So but again, Friday, what time? It was like Friday afternoon. What time was the kickoff on that?
That show was a local time 7:00 start. But
nobody's going to go to that.
Yeah, it was. It actually, interestingly enough, Jay, it kind of became the industry show in a way, that people that weren't booked for Spring Break or anything else, like the amount of just wrestlers that were at the back wall watching the Friday night show, like whatever they announced as the attendance is absolutely bogus, but it was at a certain point, like maybe 4-1 fans to wrestlers just hanging out watching the shows. Like the very visibly Hazuki and Starlight Kid bought tickets and sat in the crowd for that show. So it was kind of damned by that slot regardless. But the venue managed to make up for it, at least being able to bounce sound pretty well.
And this was my revelation from this weekend. Was I remember having this conversation with the two of you, 3 or 4 years ago when Dragon Gate it was like, okay, they might be going back to America, but what does the indie scene mean at this point? And we all were, under the unfortunate conclusion that, okay, well, if they're going to make any noise, it has to be with Game Changer, but Game Changer and that crowd, that entails all of its own issues. But there's now this, joint promotional pact between Deadlock and West Coast and Prestige and Defy. And if they continue to run, I know Defy was linked up with Game Changer for Vegas stuff, but they're more in line with the West Coast and Prestige and Deadlock promotions. If that continues to be a thing and Dragon Gate is able to run one Dragon Gate USA show in the same way that DDT has the one DDT show on the Game Changer side of things, and then much like they did this past year where you have a Prestige show with Z-Brats and a West Coast show with Yamato and Susumu and, a Defy show with Gold Class, let's say they come over as a group next time. I felt there was actual viability there to make some of these trips worth it, rather than, hey, we're going to send 6 guys over. They're going to be on a Game Changer show. They're going to work a random show here. Maybe one of them ends up on a Bloodsport and then they go home. It seems like there's an actual thirst with this second group of promotions that didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago in the way they do now.
Yeah, and also I would say, at least like talking about this year, because of having that kind of format, it was kind of noticeable. I mostly, if Dragon Gate was not involved in Vegas, I did my own thing other than that. But you would go to these other shows, and like in particular, I managed to miss seeing the Prestige match live, and I went back and saw it on tape.
And that was Shun, Ishin, Minoura against Arez, Galeno, and Dr. Wagner 3.
Yeah. But the thing that you started to notice throughout the week was the American crowds were getting to know that, Z-Brats is going to come out and they're going to crowd brawl, and the crowd started to anticipate and react to that kind of thing. That shows a little bit of credence to that. If you have them kind of quote unquote invading these other promotions, the fans at least, but because by Friday, even for that decimated crowd, everyone, like, as soon as Z-Brats came out, there was an air of difference about them that started to build throughout the week as people became more and more aware of what their deal was. So there's viability there. I guess the thing I would say about that West Coast contingent is the other aspect that we have to talk about with this is the fact of the matter that in the marketplace now, you do these shows as piggybacks or leeching off of bigger, large shows. And the issue is that you have one property that's incredibly hot, and then the other property that their big United States show is looking at to be at under 20,000 tickets. So you're not going to have as much people flying in for all these weekends outside of maybe WrestleMania and Royal Rumble, that being able to, other than just to parachute in and run a couple shows, I don't know if there's a reality that these weekends and this just overall ecosystem really has an ability to sustain it. Like, even if we're talking like DGUSA as a concept, at least by Gabe Sapolsky, it was supposed to be essentially 3 weekends a year. That if AEW's fly-in big shows were doing the 40,000, 50,000, 60,000 people coming to the city, I think that's possible, but that's just not where we're at right now in 2025. So I at least as someone who lives in Dallas Fort Worth and seeing that like Tokyo Joshi Pro is running all in weekend, but Jay, they are running as far East Dallas as you can be without technically with still being in the area. It's 45 minutes from where on the interstate from where the all in is going to be to that venue. That tells me that basically you have to depend on the WWE fly-in weekends, and I don't know if that's viable for a permanent promotion, basically.
Yeah, and God, those weekends, WWE sure does a whole lot of. They're making
they're muscling people out.
I think we were talking about this before you hit record. Is that like WrestleMania weekend started as there was a WrestleMania on Sunday, and you had Friday, and there were people flying in the day before, and they could go to a wrestling show on Saturday night, and then 2006, the WWE Hall of Fame wasn't, I think SmackDown was still on what was SmackDown? What day was
Friday at that
SmackDown
point.
on?
Friday.
2006, because it was on Thursdays.
By 2006, I was watching it, so it was Friday, because that's when I remember it as a child.
But I think they taped. I think it was pre-taped.
That sounds right.
Weekend.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't know, but and
I guess you know what? I think it was a show Tuesday that aired Friday. I think might have been the schedule at that point.
Yeah, because
ECW was live on Tuesdays.
Before, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was, there was one WWE event in town for 2 days, for essentially the weekend, and maybe you have wrestling shows on maybe Saturday night and maybe Sunday afternoon. But now, I mean, God, like Wednesday, man. I mean, like you gotta like stack PTO to be able to even go and enjoy all of like
you have to do like your full 2 weeks and dedicate it around it. Yeah.
And that was another thing that made the Wednesday time slot death this time around, is that we announced it so late that most people, like, their plans, like their travel plans and their flights and their hotels are booked however far ahead of time, and everybody's planning on WrestleMania weekend starting Thursday. If anybody that's even arriving Wednesday, like they're arriving late, or like, I don't know how many people that go in for WrestleMania weekend are there and primed and ready to start going to wrestling shows on Wednesday.
Yeah,
I could be wrong. Am I wrong?
No. I think what we see here, because there is that. I think you're 100% right that that's happening. I think there's a generational aspect that's now kind of at play a little bit, in that maybe, especially with now we're approaching 20 years of WrestleMania weekends, which, God, that makes me feel old. But people, like, we were mainly hanging with Rich at the flagship. Rich is my age, and you have people that are at that maybe mid 30s to mid 40s that this was part of their youth, Case and I have talked about, because of his job, how much he has seen like the revitalization of early 2000s pop punk as like a complete like nostalgia play, because you go back,
keeping alternative music afloat. I'm so thankful for it.
But,
I have a job because of it.
but the reality is, and I think, Case, you would agree with me, is that when you look at the shows that happen for Dragon Gate over Mania weekend on Wednesday and Friday, it, at least for the people that were there for Dragon Gate, you're getting a certain demographic that is just completely separate from the people that are flying in for WrestleMania weekend. People that are liking to throw up their hands and say yeet because they see all the clips on YouTube. Like, that's it's just how the wrestling kind of generation splits are kind of play, that like this older generation that came to be over like the Attitude Era, the new generation in the 90s, like we're in our 30s and 40s now. And I think that it does in some ways allow people at that age to maybe specialize in and be someone like me, going like, oh, Dragon Gate's in town, I just want to go and see Dragon Gate. That's an opportunity, but that's going to be such a smaller sliver of what it used to be in 2008, 2009, even really up until COVID, I would say, for Mania weekend.
Well,
right. I mean,
go ahead, Jay.
I was just gonna say, like, if it's like, if I could drive there and back, sure, but like, I could fly to New Orleans to see a Dragon Gate USA house show. I'm just not going to do it. Like, during WrestleMania weekend, when there's like Las Vegas and New Orleans in general, which are crowded and packed, 365 days a year party towns anyway. Then you factor in there's all these wrestling fans there, and you have to deal with, can I find a hotel room? And prices are going to be jacked up because there's 60,000 wrestling fans coming, and like economically, and well, this is what we've been talking about this in Japan, that like, it's like, I'll just stay home and watch it on the streaming service. That's enough for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at least like for me personally, I am fortunate that like plane flights to New Orleans or plane flights to Vegas are pretty like current and fast because of flying out of DFW, but that's not the case for the vast majority of people too. Like it's just not
Yeah.
a reality.
Yeah, I mean, like I was never going to go this year. Like it just wasn't in the budget for both for me or for them. And like, I didn't even have the conversation, but I did look, and just the idea of, because I can't go back to the U.S. and not go home, so I would either have to go to Buffalo first or go to Buffalo after, and like that was just Buffalo to Vegas to Buffalo was another X $100 on top of all of it with connections in these other places, and it just sounded like you just deal with whatever announcers you guys get. Like I'm staying home.
and we dealt with some announcers.
Who did the announcing? Like it was
It was Joe
and Bettini.
Dombrowski and Rich Bocchini, and I sent Dombrowski notes because I like Joe. Joe does a lot of Chicago Indies, and Joe's a smart guy. He does I think MLW or was doing MLW, and he's a very professional announcer. But it was obvious, partially because I wrote the notes, I knew what I wrote, but when Joe wasn't reading things that I directly wrote for him in terms of characters and storylines, it was clear he had no context or concept of what he was talking about if it was anything Dragon Gate specific. As a play-by-play guy, he's fine. He can call a wrestling match, but it didn't feel like you were watching Dragon Gate announcers call a Dragon Gate match. It felt like you were watching guys who happen to know wrestling announce a wrestling match.
Yeah, and not to blow up his spot, one of the things that when Case and I did that DGUSA series over COVID, that like one of the big conclusions and one of like the big failures was that Gabe, for all of his good and bad, just was not able to exhibit the amount of care that a promotion like Dragon Gate takes to book, and it showed on the DGUSA shows in that era. And it just reeked of, oh, why wouldn't a ring announcer who hasn't called these guys before go to Ho-Ho and say, can you just run through how to pronounce these guys' names for me once? Like that kind of like lack of care was really evident.
Because you had multiple pronunciations throughout the weekend of Susumu, and somehow Kota Minoura is the one who's, I heard his name was said different every time I heard him introduced.
By the same person?
Yes. Yep.
Well, Japanese is hard.
Yeah, Minoura is not the one that I thought people were going to get hung up with, but nevertheless, it was. I think the Friday show showed that there was some viability in the marketplace, especially if you can link up with Game Changer, or with not with Game Changer, but with Deadlock and West Coast and Prestige and groups like that. But also, one of the points that I've made is I do feel like whenever Dragon Gate in America comes up, there's always this conversation of viability and, how often are they going to run? It's like, I don't know, if those guys show up for Mania every year like the DDT guys do, great. I think they'll kill it every year. No one left that DDT show this year saying like, oh man, you got to watch this match. But Dragon Gate with the Panther Brothers tag and Yamato and Rich Swann, and then the 6-man, which was on the level of most of the 6-mans that have ever occurred in America. It was like, all right, this was good stuff. We got some positive buzz out of this.
It's good. I mean, it's good. I mean, it's good that that the people that went enjoyed the show and there was some good buzz coming out of it. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. First step will be getting the visas renewed, and I don't know. I think I said to you over email that I actually think that the path forward may actually be this. The what is it? The UPWF.
Mm-hmm.
This, right. The conglomerate over here of Japanese companies, like the union here that they formed, doing like their own thing. Instead of New Japan doing like Resurgence, that ends up becoming like a weekend where there's like a Dragon Gate show, there's a Stardom show, there's a New Japan show. Like that sort of thing might be a viable thing, but then, I don't
slivers
know what
of
the
slivers.
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what the finances in Bushi. WWE might own New Japan a year from now. Who knows? Like there's so many variables at play on that I would, and who knows what the dollar is going to be worth a year from now. Doing these shows in the U.S. was not we want. I mean, a lot of it was let's go to the U.S. and hang out and see some friends, but a lot of it was like we want to earn dollars, because if we earn a dollar, it's 160 yen, but you know everybody came back and the dollar is 140 yen now. So it might not even be it might not be financially viable to take these guys and pay yen to fly them out there to earn dollars, if it's 1 to 1, or even if it's 1 to 120 next time. It's just, let's just keep these guys over here, save the money, save the miles, and load up the house shows to make sure we have all of our draws here. Which is what happened in 2014.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even before that. So it might be better just to send matches. Send Shun and Homari and Kami and Rita and have them do a match. Have them do that match somewhere. Have Rita do Bloodsport and do some other. It might, sending individuals rather than doing shows might be the best thing. But we'll see. We'll see what happens next year. We got a year now to. I'm sure, like, I'll start having these conversations. The conversations with Ho-Ho usually start up around December, so we'll see what happens around December. If Ho-Ho's still here, he might get a job from somewhere.
The one thing that coming out of the week that we would have to pitch to him, though, I think would be one of the more fascinating pieces of wrestling content. At least to me, would be sitting down with Ho-Ho and being like, well, we want to have the life story of Ho-Ho Lone, because he is like one of the more I've talked with him, the more fascinated I am more impressed. And just like running into him in Vegas and him going like, all right, yeah, I need to go drive this church bus across town to go pick up Yamato for WrestleCon. Like those...
he said it was a school bus.
Yeah, it was quite large. I watched him back out of a spot, and it's not that he was a bad driver, but it was terrifying because of how big the bus was.
Yeah, it was a church bus. It was like a 5-row Ford Econoline that Ho-Ho was driving. It was great.
But we were joking, Mike and I, just brushing by Ho-Ho as many times as we did over the last week. It's like, this is where the lack of legacy print media has failed us, because Ho-Ho needs like a Sports Illustrated feature of being wrestling's last real hustler, because what he coordinates is fascinating. Just the amount of things that have to go through him for a weekend like that to be successful, and he seemingly pulled it off. I mean, everybody was on time at every show, and they couldn't sell merch in the venue that Prestige and West Coast and the Friday show, that venue, they had
an asshole.
Yeah, they had a few weird rules, and so they couldn't sell merch there, and I know they weren't happy about that, but otherwise, from my perspective, it seemed like everything went about as well as it could have from a coordination perspective.
And God bless him.
God bless him. Jay, any other thoughts on Dead or Alive? We have a few quick other things to throw at you. Anything else you want to mention on Dead or Alive?
No, I think we hit everything. I mean, hold on, let me look at the card one more time, see if there's anything.
We've got Bendito coming in. Bendito was on the Kobe show today. I haven't seen it yet, but I got a DM from somebody saying that he looked pretty good on that show.
He looked all right. Yeah, his finisher looked wicked because he's such a big dude.
Yeah,
but
the opening is Hyo and Fuda and Yanagiuchi. Two-part question: any updates on Sahara's health, and any updates on Sugaguchi and Oshima and anybody else that might have not debuted yet?
I don't know about Aki's neck. I know he was in a neck brace.
Yes.
He had a neck injury in Kyushu. I don't know. The other guys, fuck if I know. Like if Koki doesn't debut in Sapporo in May, then I would just reset the clock and expect him to debut in Sapporo in December.
Yeah.
And I have no idea on the other guys. Like Kame's dad is still too new. The other kid whose name I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe after World, but like no real updates on that. I guess either timing or they're just not that good. Like I know, Koki's gonna have a tough time. Like he's and Tsujiguchi, but he might vanish and he might end up under a mask. But yeah, I don't know anything personally.
We had a question in the Discord. I don't know if you can speak to this at all, if you'd prefer to decline, but I know a few years ago it seemed like Casey and Maria were sort of the people that were leading a lot of those classes. Do you know at this point in the dojo who is sort of day-to-day leading operations there?
It's Kagetora.
Kage, okay.
Yeah, that's why everybody has great chops.
That would make sense.
that would make sense, yeah, for sure. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't bring him up. We talked about him on the main show this week. Takashi Okamura passing away last week. Just one of those figures that I don't think people realize had a lot to play, at least in the initial success of the promotion. We were wondering if you had any other thoughts about his passing and his role within the Dragon system over the years.
No, I mean, there's not that much to say. I mean, he was, he ran the business side of things, and he was ex-mafia, and he used those connections, and that it was essential to getting the business off the ground. They picked him to lead the business because he was the worst wrestler out of the Buko Dojo guys. Like that's the story between like Mochi, Taru, Choco, and him. Like he was the worst. He had no future in wrestling, so they said, get out of the ring and run the business. And it was in the Torimon days. It was Office Taru. Taru's local business was the one that ran a lot of it. That closed down, and then Torimon ended. Taru left, etc. And Okamura, he was the boss, and they remember the Stonecutters episode of The Simpsons.
Right. Yeah.
What did the Stonecutters do at the end of that episode? They made an entire other group to get away from the Chosen One, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
no Homers allowed.
Yeah, that's what they did here. He was essentially getting Dragon Gate off the ground, but he wasn't a good dude.
Yeah.
I mean, he had his vices, and I don't want to. He's passed away after an illness, and I don't want to speak ill of the dead because we all have our vices. But he ran the company like his piggy bank. He used the money on gambling and wine, women, and song. Not necessarily wine, women, and the ponies. Probably is the more accurate way to say it. And it was detrimental to the health of the company. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that. Shima didn't leave Dragon Gate. Shima wasn't kicked out of Dragon Gate. Okamura was. And Shima went with him, essentially. He had no choice in the matter, but it wasn't he was leaving to go do OWE, or they broke away to make a new company to do OWE. Like they got, they were wicked and doing, embezzling money and doing all these things. And that was also 7 years ago, and he left the wrestling business, and he was sick, and I was wondering maybe they would do a moment of silence today or in Kobe. That this would have been the place to acknowledge it, and they didn't, and I understand why they didn't. And that's really it.
It makes a lot of sense how things played out.
It's sad. You never want to hear about somebody getting sick and dying. I don't want to take glee in that or anything, but I don't think that there's any need for the Dragon Gate side to acknowledge it because it was not amicable, and it was a long time. Like, do you
The last
I don't know.
person that was around, or the last person who debuted under Okamura, if my math is right, was Yuki Yoshioka. Like, that's how long ago it was.
Yes, 2016 class, because nobody debuted in 2017.
Which, as soon as I like started thinking about it that way, and it might have been because of in the moment in 2018, everything was like so fast and like what's happening, and with all of that, but now it kind of made me a little bit like look back and at least going like, geez, no, like this promotion is, yes, it's Dragon Gate, yes, it's Dragon System, and the blood always flows through it, but it's like it's a different world now. Like 7 years, and over the last 7 years might have been 70 years in a lot of ways.
You know, these 7 years in particular, you know,
Right.
there's enough happened to where Okamura feels like an even more part of the distant past than in reality, you know, it is.
Yeah, I mean, how many people really think? I mean, even like New Japan. Do you still think about Harold May, or do you think about, the crazy guy that owned All Japan, the Shiro Ishii guy? You know,
that guy was a character.
He was a character, yeah. And you remember him because he made himself a character. But
Yeah.
owners come and go. I don't know. I mean, he was sick, and it's too bad that he suffered like that. But
my one question with him was if there was anything that he was ever specifically credited with of like, oh, that was Okamura's idea and that was really good for business, or if it was just, you know, if he I don't know if there was ever anything specific with him.
He was good for business. I mean, he had connections. There's there were markets, like his hometown, like Nobioka, and he forged a lot of strong. Like, he was really good at forging relationships with sponsors. So he was great for business. It was just he knew the problem was like all that money he was making, he was taking most of it. So
yeah, I remember Jay, like right after 2018, talking with you, and you made a point in an email of 2018. Yeah, the attendance is so down, but actually they ended up making the most money more money on that Kobe World than like the last two because he wasn't around pocketing.
Yeah, exactly. And also, he was the one that was, let's announce 10,000 people, and there's only 5,000 people here. Like they were big, like really big. He was really big on we're gonna pretend that we're bigger than we are. When at the time, they were, business was, they didn't need to exaggerate because business was much better than everybody else was. But because, whatever, is what it is.
We had a question from Alan Forel in the Discord that I wanted to ask before we let you go, because it was an interesting question, and I'm going to read it verbatim here because I want to make sure that I get it right. Alan asked, in sort of relation to just, backstage behind the scenes stuff, future of the company, he said, of all the older guys in the company, who does Jay feel are most likely to stay with DG in some capacity after their wrestling days are over, and what kind of roles could he see them having? I'd be just curious to hear him talk about guys like Susumu and Kid from that perspective, given that I would assume he's got to know them fairly well over the years.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think right now we kind of we assume that GM is going to take over as president someday.
Yeah. Wasn't Keto like original plan 5 years for him at least, and then COVID happened? Yeah.
No, I mean the original plan was 5 years and then Yoshino, but
right. Yeah.
That was but and who knows how much of that was going to be ceremonial. There's also the idea that Saito doesn't handle any of the business stuff, that he's the general manager in the ring, and that when the time comes and Keto steps down or retires, that it's not Saito that takes that, it's Don Fuji or it's Kito's son, or it's just a business person to handle the business side of things, because Keto is not like Okamura came out of work. He was he was an on-camera presence. I mean, he wrestled matches throughout his run, and he always came out and did the big speech at World every year, and liked to have that level of visibility, whereas Keto just wants to stay in his gym trunks and be and in the room, in the room backstage. Like, he doesn't need to be out in front of people, in a suit and putting on the airs of being, like, I'm the company president. And you could carry that on, and it could just be, a business person that takes over that spot. I think to the question, I think Fuji is likely to stay on. Susumu Dragon Kid, who knows how many more years they're going to be wrestling, right?
Well, I
they
bring
could
that up
still
all the
go.
time. I mean, they've been wrestling, and somebody like Susumu was never hurt. I mean, 25 years is a long fucking time, and
Well,
I don't think people always realize that.
Mochi is at 35 years.
I know.
And, I could see Susumu doing another 10 without slowing. Dragon Kid, I don't know. Dragon Kid, yeah. I mean, how much longer is Ultimo going to keep going? Ultimo's 50, 58, going to be 59 this year.
You would think he gets to 40 and maybe 40s when he calls it quits, but you would think he'd hit that 40 anniversary show.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Seeing how he was working Mania weekend, he might have another 40 in him, to be quite honest.
Zero bumps taken in Las Vegas.
Well, I mean, that's smartest man in wrestling, right? Get paid the most and bump the least.
It was really fun seeing a true Ultimo show, like where he refuses to get in until the crowd was loud enough, and all of all of the magic of Yoshihiro Sai.
The other question, I honestly, I think the more interesting version of that question is, how much space is there for these guys after they retire?
Yeah, that's kind of where I wonder with how like, at least out of COVID, you saw a lot of larger contracts, kind of like with even people like Eita, like that frees up a lot of space. And what space is there for that later?
I think, Horiguchi's got a family in Kumamoto, and I could see him just leaving entirely. Like, Ichikawa's gone. Ichikawa retired. He's got he's working as a caregiver now. Kondo just left, actually. Kondo's contract expired.
What's his shoot job again? What does he do outside of wrestling?
He's a baker, right?
Shuji Kondo?
Yeah.
He's got the cookie shop, the financier shop. He's got a personal gym. He's got a nail salon. I mean, he's a businessman. Like, pro wrestling is his his beer money.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm right, he started on that path when Wrestle One was formed. Like, he was starting those businesses.
He was the vice president, right?
Yeah.
I mean, his run in Dragon Gate was really, really snake bitten, because he was gonna come in. He was gonna be like the secret weapon, like the secret weapon for the Toryumon generation in the Generation War. Like, they were going to be beaten back, and then Kondo was going to come in as the the mystery guy in KOG, and kind of be the shot in the arm for them. But then the pandemic happened, and he ended up coming back on a house show in Kyoto in front of a clap crowd, and just at the end, and then at the end, when that all ended and things were shuffling around, he tore his ACL out, and and he had his one dream gate shot, and his dream gate shot was the Minoru lights out thing, and it just it never got it got off on the wrong foot, and it just never got it never got back on. Like, it's not bad terms or anything like that. He just doesn't have the X amount of dates per year contract anymore. Like, if there's something that calls for it, he'll come back. He'll come back. Like, I could see him coming in and doing, Owashi's last match here is going to be real soon, because Owashi's show is in June. So I could see Owashi's last Dragon Gate match being at one of those Korakuen Hall, at the Korakuen Hall shows in June, and I could see Kondo coming in and being a part of that. But like, something like losing the veteran guys entirely though is kind of something that I'm a little worried about.
It's like a
There's
huge existential crisis of the promotion, I feel like.
well, it's not even that. It's so you gotta like someone like Ichikawa. I'm just gonna use Ichikawa as an example because he's gone, and he was from Gifu, and Gifu was a hot market over the last few years. It was really good business in Gifu, and a lot of that was because he has local connections. He would go and do the rounds and hang up posters and sell tickets. And Dragon Gate is still a sell tickets by hand company, and the important thing when you're a sell tickets by hand company is that you go and you make these connections when the show comes to okay, I'll just use myself as an example because it's I don't want to put anybody on blast. So say I run Dragon Gate comes to Buffalo 3 times a year, right? So on my off days I fly back to Buffalo, and I go to the restaurant that I ate at growing up as a kid, and they let me hang a poster up, and talk to everybody, and maybe I get some of the people to agree to buy some tickets. And someone from my high school graduating class is on the city council now, so I go and I work with them, and maybe I do an appearance at a school or something like that, and I go and I advertise and I hang a poster up and maybe hand some tickets out. And and I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've been going back, and I've cultivated a following, and because of that I've been able to sell a lot of tickets for the Dragon Gate show in Buffalo 3 times a year, the hypothetical one. And now I've inspired the next generation, and a new trainee from Buffalo has come in and they've joined Dragon Gate, and they're fresh out of high school, and they're fresh out of high school, and they grew up in the pandemic, so they don't know anybody. Everybody they know the only people they know are the people that they play Minecraft or Fortnite with, and they can't go sell tickets to those people because who knows who they are. And I'm so busy because the majority of a lot of my salary is coming from the kickback, from what I get back on the tickets I sold. So if I sold 100 tickets to this Buffalo show and I get X percent 3 times a year, that's a sizable part of my salary, hypothetically, right? And so there's this new kid from Buffalo, and he's fresh out of high school. He knows nothing about business. He knows nothing about the world, and he's got to do the same thing, right? The expectation on him is going to be that he needs to go out and hustle and create connections and hang up posters and sell tickets and do this and do that. But if I introduce, I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon, right? I'm gonna keep wrestling, and I need this ticket money. I count on this. When I do my budget at the beginning of the year, and I need this ticket money. I'm gonna sell this amount of tickets to these 3 shows. But now there's this new kid. Am I gonna what incentive is there for me to introduce him to my local connections? Because if I do that, it could take money out of my pocket. Now, if I'm thinking about the future of the company and I'm want to look after this kid, of course I'm going to do it. But at the same time, it's money out of my pocket. So for some of these kids, I mean, not so much Yoshiki. Yoshiki's got his connections from the police department, but some of these kids that are coming up, nobody's teaching them business. Nobody's teaching them how to make these connections, how to go out and hustle and do this. And that is where the veterans retiring and not passing on that knowledge because they need to protect their ticket sales or they need to protect their spot. Again, this is all hypothetical, but I'm just looking at that Gifu, the tag league show in Gifu that was on the network. And there were about half of the amount of people at that show than there were at the tag league show, at the King of Gate show in Gifu 2 years ago when Ichikawa was still around. And again, I don't know the reality of the situation, whether the scenario I just described is happening anywhere. Yeah, I really do not know if that's happening, but that's the scenario that popped into my head because I had this conversation with someone before. I'm like, one of the wrestlers, like, so what, do you do any information share? Like does, hi, I went back to my hometown this weekend, and these are the connections I made. This is what I did to make the connection. This is this is my or even if it's like, let's say I want to do a show in Buffalo. We've never done one there before. I want to do a Dragon Gate show in Buffalo. What is the project plan? And maybe
Right. What's the institutional knowledge going about with it?
Yeah. So what are the steps to take? What's the timeline? Who's responsible? Nobody's these are kids out of high school. They're 18 years old. Occasionally you get people like Kato who are educated and they come in and they can hold their own on this. But some of these other that is I'm more concerned about whether that culture is being passed on correctly, or if it's just I sold my tickets, why didn't you sell your tickets? Or why is nobody selling tickets and nobody's teaching these kids how to sell tickets?
And it's so interesting.
I didn't answer Alan's question at all. I'm sorry, but
yeah, but it's so interesting. So Case and I have been doing this project looking at Michinoku Pro in 1992 through 1994. We're right now in 1994, but it's we get this great source that was translated. That was one of Sasuke's books that basically goes up and through 1995, and the amount of hustling that was done by Sasuke, Yone Genjin, Taku Michinoku, up in Iwate in the early 90s, going door to door, and how much of his book is talking about that and thinking about generational shifts and at least what's the difference between Zoomers and Gen A, and how millennials, and with that, it does make you really wonder. At least I could only anecdotally go off of the teenagers and young adults I have in my life, but it does seem globally like certain kinds of hustle and that kind of culture, unless it's imparted directly from if Don Fucci's put on a show in Osaka and he goes, all right, Tanaka, you're coming along with me as I'm going to do my rounds with that. How is that information
100%.
getting imparted? Is that, and I didn't think about that necessarily, that aspect of the business, and how, especially for a company like Dragon Gate, that's the lifeblood of it, and the institutional knowledge that. But I was more, when I referred to the existential threat, is oh, you've basically were able to see the careers of the original stars up until their retirement or close to that. How do the fans adapt to the new generations with that? But even more important, and I think the way you lay it out, it's really well, the idea of the institutional knowledge and the built up cultural thing of hustling, spot promoting and things like this. How is that getting imparted? I didn't necessarily think about that aspect of that.
Yeah, and the other thing is the other side of that, and the other side of that is the older guys only know that, and because it's worked for so long, because it's worked for so long, or because it's been satisfactory for so long, they haven't learned anything new. The idea of
it worked then, so it works now.
You're doing this tournament, but it's all off TV, and so for KOG, okay. Sorry, I'm going all the way, I'm going really far back in time here, but for KOG, when everything, I think we talked right before Gate of Destiny. I think was the last time we talked.
Right, because we wanted to talk about Ichikawa before he retired. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we knew KOG wasn't going to be on TV at the time, and I think I mentioned then that the Gower producer came to say, okay, they're going to announce King Gate today, and it's gonna run through November, and we had just taken the video for the live schedule, No, that doesn't make sense. Or I think either way, I looked at the schedule and I said, okay, but wait a minute. So we're going to have there's only two live shows that month, so everything's going to be off TV, and they're like, yep, without missing a beat. And I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense. And they're like, yeah, you're right. And like, it didn't, like, the idea of content being so important in 2025 just didn't register with them. And like, it was alarming. Like, it came down to the wire on that. Like, I was being really annoying about that. And ultimately GM made the call and he was like, look, it's not in the budget. Like, Gower was willing, like, Gower was going to give them, like, Gower was ready. They had a hand camera, like, we'll give you this hand camera, take the footage, give it back to us, and we'll upload everything. And they just, GM ultimately said no at the end for various reasons. But like, it was alarming that nobody even thought at the beginning that having a tournament off TV was not a good thing. And they came around for the tag league, and they put everything on TV, thankfully, for the tag league. And but I don't think that I don't think they understand that their need, like, the social media presence is terrible as well. You look, the visuals are, like, the banners and the graphic design and everything has been exactly the same for how many years now? Like, you look at
like that like rectangular image, I feel like I've seen variations of for like the last 15 years.
It's yeah, and it's even worse because then the Ryukyu Dragon one is exactly the same too. So it's like default fonts from from Microsoft Word 95, and it's like all of that, and like there's a TikTok account, but it's like it's on Hyo's phone and nobody else, and the way they run social media is like, sorry, this is kind of inside, but like, there's nobody that is social media literate enough to like run their Twitter account. So like, everything that's put on Twitter is crafted by someone and then pasted to the person that has the app on their phone, and they're told post exactly this and nothing else, because there's no crafting of there's no social media literacy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here. And there's no leveraging of clips on Instagram. There's no leveraging of anything. And we're coming into a time period now where, God, I don't even know where to start on this. So WWE Network is dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The WWE Network is totally dead. And I'm sure there's going to be, like, at some point, somebody, the people that do like the business, like maybe the Wrestling Observer will do it, or like Brandon Thurston, or like those people that do like the economics of wrestling. There needs to be like a postmortem on the WWE Network, and most importantly, the effect of $9.99.
Oh yeah, like it completely. That was actually like a random aside thing that I'll ask you about in a second. But like the $9.99 and how it completely then forced everyone to be in reaction, and $9.99 was such a damaging thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, incredibly damaging. Because what is the main criticism that has been consistent about the Dragon Gate Network for the entire time it's existed?
Too expensive, not enough.
It's more expensive than everybody else. And like if WWE Network had came out at $14.99, which is it's only $5, and it's a perfectly reasonable price for what the WWE Network was offering, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, I'm sure New Japan would love to have that extra $5 for the last 10 years of their streaming service. Because they're looking for that money right now.
Right. And WWE and similarly, if they wanted to do it, Cyberfight or Abema, they're able, because of the economies of scale, that's why $9.99 works for them, because they know that they were aiming for 1.5 million subscribers so that they can eat the individual ones because they're going to get it back en masse. There's just not that kind of possible fan base for other promotions who are forced into the $9.99 paradigm by WWE.
Yes, and the fact is, WWE Network came right at the entry point to kind of like everybody's going to have their own individual streaming service.
Oh, just streaming in general, really, and like the advent.
In general, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's what I mean. Like not even wrestling, but like that was when, HBO is going to have a streaming. Think of all of the failed streaming services that have kind of conglomerated into, Hulu and Paramount
Quibi,
Plus,
things like that.
Yeah. Or whatever. And then WWE got out because now all of the streaming services have merged, and the streaming race has become everybody needs to have content. And in Japan, like streaming is here now. I know that there's there's still kind of like the stigma, the TV is still king in Japan, and like streaming hasn't taken off there. Like it has. The pandemic forced streaming to take hold here, but not to the point where Amazon Prime is the market leader in streaming over here because everybody has Prime already. Amazon Prime is really cheap here.
Yeah, it seems like it's what the US was at like 5 years ago with Amazon Prime, because you would have the Prime Video because of the Prime delivery service.
Yeah. But Amazon is not buying sports content for Japan yet. I was having this conversation with one of the Gower producers back in January, and because he was asking, it started from a conversation about AEW, because it was around the time that there were a lot of like pictures going around of like empty AEW arenas, and he was like, well, how are they? Like their arenas are empty. How are they? How are they making money? And I was like, no, like they got a TV contract. They've got this huge TV contract, and they could, in them and WWE, they could never sell a ticket again and, still be ridiculously profitable. And he's like, oh, and he was, he stopped and he thought about it. And he's like, yeah, that's not the case here. Right. And I was like, yeah, like what needs to happen is Amazon or Netflix or someone needs to decide they want Japanese wrestling content. And he was like, oh, but then we'd all be out of a job. And I was like, okay, but you guys got baseball. And then it turned, I asked him, I was like, okay, Gaura has broadcast rights to the Ham Fighters and to the Henshin Tigers. And I asked him, if Amazon or Netflix came and said, we want, who has MLB streaming rights right now, by the way?
No one does, actually.
No one does. Okay.
They've got, okay, so their national, their deals are, they've got a Friday game on Apple TV that's exclusive to Apple TV.
There's Amazon Prime game, right?
There's an Amazon Prime game that I think is weekly, but it's just like free. Hey, if you have Prime, you can watch this game.
And I think that Prime game is actually simulcast from MLB Network. I think it's that MLB Network game of the week.
I believe you're right about that.
Yeah.
And then they've got a Saturday Fox Sports slot, a Sunday Fox
afternoon.
Yeah. That's right. No. It's Saturday Fox or Fox Sports 1, depending on availability, and then ESPN Sunday Night Baseball. But they're separating from ESPN at the end of this season because they both basically were like, we hate this partnership. Let's just go away. So MLB will totally change next year because I don't know who's going to get involved, but it won't be ESPN.
Okay, that's way more fucked than I thought it was. But yeah. The point where I was going was like, because let's say Netflix, they've succeeded with WWE and they've succeeded with their test launches for live sports, and now they want to get live sports here. Let's get the Japanese major leagues, because with Otani and all the other guys, all the other big stars coming over to to MLB, it would make sense. Let's see the Japanese big leagues, and see the future major leaguers, whatever. And so I asked him, I said, if someone like a big streamer came in and just said, we want all the streaming rights to the Japanese major leagues, would they drop it? Would they drop Gaora and drop everybody else and take it? And he was like, oh yeah, they would. So like, he didn't even hesitate. And he was like, there is that feeling, because everybody says that it would be hard, for WWE to come in and buy a Japanese company or do all this, that it would be really hard because of, for whatever reasons. It would be hard until you got to the right dollar amount, was essentially what he said to me. He's like, if the price increase was a little bit, they'll keep it Japanese. But, if they came and offered the right amount that makes it worthwhile, like Gower would lose baseball and they go out of business. And, until we're at the point where a streamer, someone wants to come in and buy Japanese wrestling content, it's going to be, New Japan World's having trouble. And, Abema is profitable now. I don't know about Wrestle Universe, but,
I think in the last Abema thing, or at least when they released it, Cyber Fight promotions aren't. But
Cyber Fight is insolvent.
Yeah,
that was like written on their last financial statement. But that's it. What do you guys think is going to happen with WWE?
I think that there are a couple promotions that they have had increasingly relations with that seem like that they are primed to swoop in for. There's like an overwhelming people the Noah relationship with WWE, and people are thinking that's going to happen that way. I just see that as Abema being a corporate overlord and having WWE on their service and going, this isn't really doing great viewership. We're helping do we're one of the promoters of their tour. Noah, you need to bring in some WWE guys to help out our investment.
Yeah.
That's how that situation has always read to me, at least.
Yeah, WWE is contractually obligated to do these things.
Like the one glaring one to me is Marigold. Marigold just seems like the second that Triple H decides, yes, Rossi's just going to hand over the key. Like that seems very apparent. At least to me, it seems kind of apparent. The other one, and not to go too much into that direction, that seems like that if I were looking to get into it and I'm looking for something that already has the infrastructure and has a certain sheen that they like, it GLEAT. There's a certain aspect about GLEAT that seems like to me that would be appealing to them until they hire and buy out GLEAT and they realize the toxic assets that come with it.
There's nothing there though. Like they don't have a dojo, they don't have a system, they don't have name value. Like
you just have the contracts basically.
And those are worth shit too because
they're toxic assets.
I don't even want to. Yeah, they're when times are hard. When times are hard in a company, there's two directions you can go. Let's when you're making guaranteed money, let's use WCW, right? You're making guaranteed money and everything's great, and then business, and then things start going not so bad. And you're still making guaranteed money, you get paid either way. You can go two directions. You can either work harder, try and earn your money, or you can do what the guys in WCW did at the end, right? And that matches up to what's going on. But anyway, just to get back to my question, I do think if I had to pick the most likely scenario, I would go with they buy Noah, along with a deal to keep Noah and WWE content on Abema for X amount of time.
Yeah.
Cyberfight goes away. Cyberfight is dissolved. DDT and Tokyo Joshi go back independent. What happens with Wrestle Universe? I don't know. Maybe it reverts back to DDT Universe or whatever. I think if I was forced at gunpoint to pick a scenario, that's the one I'm picking. But I wouldn't be surprised if they end up with New Japan. Like, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be like an oh my god moment. It would be like oh shit, okay moment at this point.
Yeah.
Why do you think that? Why do you think it is with New Japan? Just the size of it.
You know, they got, they need money. Like things are not like financially, like I don't want to get too much into, because there's a lot of stuff going on in New Japan that I don't know the exact details on. But look, Naito just left, man, under really weird circumstances, and like I mentioned earlier about Daya, that there's the people that didn't like him before still don't like him, but there's a group of people that do like him that were able to get him in, and if you extrapolate that out, they might be primed for someone to swoop in at the right time, and for when the decision makers are ready to wash their hands of things. Like, again, I'm not saying like this is even. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
Situations here can make that happen.
Yeah. I think, I think it's going to be Noah. If they do buy anybody, though, I think it's going to be Noah.
Muto seems, and I don't know what position Muto has on Noah at this point, but he seems so eager to have any sort of connection to WWE still that
he's just a star fucker. He's his own. He fucks his own star more than anybody else's.
I still think, not to go off a full Noah diatribe here, and look, maybe the almost thing that happened at the start of the year was, again, it was a contractual obligation of Noah playing nice with WWE, and hey, we'll take almost for a few shows. But the thing that's I don't think anybody's reading that situation right, and that almost seemed like a genuine phenomenon in Noah.
Super over. Like, that was a big. I don't know why people are down on that. Like, that was a huge success.
No. It was a massive success, and then WWE fucked them mid-tour when he was champion.
But that was always the plan. Like,
in what way?
Like, he wasn't gonna stay here and like live in the Noah dojo. Like, he's 8 foot tall, makes he makes WWE money. Like, it was a vacation. Like,
that might be true, but to do, everybody, I don't know why, but everybody gave WWE the benefit of the doubt, and they were like, well, they're going to bring him back in for the Rumble, and it's like, no, they took him away mid-tour and haven't used him since.
No, like, he was. I would bet a large sum of money that not a large sum of money because I don't have a large sum of money, but I would bet that he was always supposed to go back on the date that he went back.
Okay,
he would come in. Because it was at the end of January, right? He came in beginning of January.
He basically worked a month.
Yeah, he worked a month.
Yeah. Go for January, work a handful of shows, and then you're coming back at the end of the month, because you make 6 figures. We're not, you're not going to tolerate living in this dojo for however long amount of time, and Noah can't pay to keep you comfortable, and we're not going to pay to keep you over there. Go and go and do this, and however they decide to book you, that's on Noah for not taking the tag belt off of him.
Yeah, and also given the Noah's bookers, that is exactly the kind of scenario they constantly find themselves in. So that doesn't, I see your logic there.
Yeah, like I don't think like they didn't. Well, I mean, what can you do with them though? What you do with them is you don't put the tag title on them in the first place.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think that was WWE fucking them. I think it was always the plan, and they booked themselves into a corner with it.
Which is likely given Noah. That I can't argue that.
Well, Casey, oh, sorry, Jack, go ahead.
No, they did an okay crowd in Ryogoku today.
The Ozawa, look, I didn't think the Ozawa thing had the legs that it did, and it does. And again, it's not necessarily what I want out of a GHC title match, but it's worked. The Ozawa thing has worked.
Yeah, everybody thought he was going to be the new Hayabusa as well, but he was not.
No, he was not.
Yeah, and a lot of people in the West thought it was going to be Sugi.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. Him or some people were guessing Shun. Some people I don't know who this guy is. Like, people were hoping that like the internet nipple detectives would be able to identify him, but nobody's been able to identify him yet. Wow, we did not a good crowd in Art Center today, huh? Well, it wasn't gonna be, and probably won't be a good one in Kyoto tomorrow either. But is what it is. What did Noah do? Noah did 45. Did not hit 5,000. And what did? Oh, wow, New Japan only did 3,000 in Fukuoka.
I'm surprised they're doing 2 nights in Fukuoka. Yeah, they're doing tonight and tomorrow there.
It's 2 nights. Okay.
Yeah.
Gonna say.
Is tomorrow the Naito farewell show?
Think so. Yeah, because this one was the cage match today.
Yeah, he's okay. So they'll do a massive house tomorrow, right? Because it's Bushi, Hiromu, Shingo, Naito, Taichi, Tako, Umino, Ishii, and an 8-man. Yeah, if that's not sold out already, I would be surprised.
Who is Caleb? Who is this guy challenging for the? Who is
Callum Newman?
I've never heard of this guy.
That's very funny.
Well, Jay, if we had like another hour, I could take you through the steps of how United Empire ended up this way. But
Jay, I don't know if you've caught any of the TJP Jeff Cobb drama.
I have. Yeah.
Newman will eventually be a very good wrestler.
Okay.
He annoys people right now in the same way that Ospreay annoyed people like 7 or 8 years ago.
I see.
I like him a lot. He misses bad sometimes. I've seen Newman have some just disjointed, just like, oh God, what was that type of match? But
eventually he's going to learn how to work with his speed and his size.
Yeah,
essentially.
He's somebody that I remain buying stock in. I think he's going to be very good, but he has become a punching bag for a certain type of fan that I think maybe was relieved they got rid of Ospreay, and then Newman came in and was like, hey, we're going to do this whole thing again.
I see.
Yeah.
Like a Mentai Kid on this show. Mentai Kid's retiring this year.
I know.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
He's a Torimon guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder if Ultimo is going to show up on that one for that. I would imagine so.
No, he's wrestling Ishimori. So yeah, they're classmates. So yeah, no, that's good.
I forgot he was X.
Yeah, he was one of the cars. He was Gallardo.
There we go.
Retired once. He retired on the Dragon Door show. Then came out of retirement. Huh? How about that?
There's no relationship with Dragon Gate and Kyushu Pro at this point. It doesn't seem like there is. Yeah, is that a Tajiri thing?
I mean, there never was any sort of relationship there. I mean, Tajiri is there. I mean, but they're a nonprofit organization. I mean, there's not really.
Their houses are almost all free shows.
Everything is free. Yeah, they don't sell tickets. Like they don't sell tickets. Like it's all free show. It's all free giveaways. But I mean, they do a tremendous job of getting people together and keeping people interested in wrestling in Fukuoka, in Kyushu, which is, it's really important because who else even goes? Noah goes there. Does Noah go to Kyushu? I mean, New Japan goes there a few times a year. We go there a few times a year. All Japan goes there. And everybody goes there a handful of times a year. So, needs to be somebody keeping interest there, like them and Osaka Pro and Kansai and what Kazuo does up in Hakodate. It's small time, but it's really important.
I don't know if they've gone to Fukuoka in 10. Am I reading that right? 10 years? Hold on.
They did Kokusai Center within the last few years, and they did.
Oh, I see. I gotcha. I was looking at the wrong thing. They ran one show on Across in February, and then they did one show. They go once a year, it looks like.
Okay. Yeah. And it's Miyahara's from there, so All Japan does really well when they go there.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's see. I'm sorry. Any other random topics? Any other random questions?
I
before
I think I've run through all mine. Case, do you have anything else you wanted to ask Jay before we got out of here?
No. As always, Jay, I greatly appreciate the time, greatly appreciate the insight, and I know Mike and I are looking forward to Dead or Alive on Monday, and I certainly hope that you are looking forward to calling it as well. It should be a very fun show.
Yeah, it's going to be looking forward to getting in. Like it's Golden Week, so I'm looking forward to getting in and out as fast as possible. But yeah, it's it's interesting. Like, sorry, one last tangent. Like the very first Dead or Alive I called was 2021, and it was like the worst. Like I wasn't gonna come back after that show because like the mood in the building was like so bad that year. Like that was the year with the bad cage matches that SB and whoever SB teamed with against Yamato and Dragon Kid and Kikuta getting injured.
Kai, yeah.
And also the fact that we were under state of emergency and we didn't know when we were going to be allowed to run shows again after. Like the shows immediately after were already canceled.
Yeah,
like
the King of Gate show was Empty Arena that year. The Korakuen one.
Yeah, like everything because Osaka, Tokyo, and some other areas were state of emergency, but Nagoya didn't go under state of emergency until like until after Golden Week, which is really weird. But like that show was like felt really bad. But I'm looking forward to going this and it being a good show, being a great show, and being the last time we're here and having a good crowd and being able to end, we didn't really talk about the legacy of Dead or Alive, but ending, the legacy of Dead or Alive is a big show, on a high note. So I hope, and hopefully it's a good show, and hopefully everybody enjoys it. And I don't have to try. I'll have to travel for World, and I don't have to travel. I don't have to leave. I don't have to leave my neighborhood until Fukuoka in February. It's awesome.
I know that's quite exciting for you.
No more rushing to get that last bullet train, so you don't end up in a bad bed.
It's the Fukuoka is the worst because I can't. Like fingers crossed, legs crossed, everything just. If anything good happens between now and February, it's at the start time of Fukuoka in February is 3 p.m. because then I can go home. Like, if anything good happens, if there's any good news related to this to commentary work over the next year, like over a salary increase, over any sort of accolades, I just want Fukuoka to start at 3 p.m. so I can go home.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll be sure to get with you again before Kobe World in July.
Okay, sounds good. Enjoy the show on Monday, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the #1 show all about the world of Joshi Pro Wrestling. Episodes drop every other Monday, where we discuss the biggest Joshi news, review shows, and preview the hottest upcoming Joshi action.
So whether you're a new fan or an old fan, we've got something here for you at Jumping Bomb Audio.
Check us out on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
You know that feeling when you're about to score 30% off, but they want your number? Ugh. Give them your Line 2 number instead. It's a second line on your phone, perfect for nabbing promo codes without inviting spam to your party. Sign up for every discount under the sun, then block the junk texts that follow. You get all the perks, but none of the spammy baggage. More codes, less chaos. Visit line2.com/audio or download Line 2 in the App Store and get your shopping sidekick today. Because the only thing blowing up your phone should be good deals.